Dear listeners, we are planning to make a few changes to our channel and videos, and we need your help. We'd love to hear your thoughts and suggestions on how we can improve. Please share your ideas and suggestions in the comments section below. Don't forget to drop a hi if you are here. Now let's start with the story. Beware what you wish for. You just might get it. I can't count the times my old man said that. Cliché? Oh yeah. True? Yep. Definitely. Without a doubt. Take my marriage, for example. For years, I dreamed only of marrying Kristen, having a big house and, eventually, kids, and having a thriving career making tons of money. Kristen? She wanted, I thought, the same things. Come to think of it, she did want pretty much the same things. You know, a life of leisure and glamour, a happy marriage to her high school sweetheart, that's me, and a big house and a bigger credit limit. Most of our dreams were realized before they destroyed us. Truth be told, though, my marriage was dead 5 years before the paperwork was signed, sealed, and filed with the clerk of the court. I just didn't know it at the time. The cause? Doing what Kristen wanted, chasing those dreams, and moving to West Palm Beach so I could take a high-paying job as a bond salesman. West Palm, she said, her pale blue eyes sparkling. Just imagine, Tyler. Palm trees, beaches, warm sun. No snow. She smiled, one of those 1,000-watt smiles showing her perfectly straight, sparking white teeth and the cute little dimples on her cheeks. Especially no snow. And a good job, I said. A great job, baby, she said, leaning in for a tight hug before attacking me with her lips and tongue. So, based on her initial reaction, I suppose you'll just have to excuse me for being surprised that her dream wasn't all she'd thought it would be. Still, I didn't expect her to play it quite the way she did. To the contrary, her ultimate actions still stunned the hell out of me. 3 years after moving to West Palm, the problems began in earnest. Silly me, though, didn't really spot them for what they were. She's just homesick, I thought at the time. Needs to keep her mind off of her sister and parents back in Grant City and stay focused on everything that was going well for us at the time. By that point, I was the third highest selling bond salesman in the company, raking in over $250,000 a year. We had a nice house mortgaged to the hilt, a pair of luxury sedans in the garage, and Kristen had a deep tan and extensive wardrobe. What she didn't have was a job or many friends. Or me, for that matter. The problem with being such a successful bond salesman, and the reason they paid me $250,000 a year, was that I was gone half the time. Flying from Dallas to Atlanta, then the Big Easy to the Big Apple, peddling our products to the end salesmen who would sell them to the public or their chosen few customers. When I wasn't flying out 2 or 3 weeks a month, I was working 70 hours a week trying to line up new contacts and future sales. All right? Get the picture? I'm a dumb, and I should probably have been paying a little better attention back at the home front. Of course, Kristen grumbled, but that always led to a whole new series of issues. Can't you just cut back a little? She'd say. Sure, I'd shrug. No prob. So long as you can, too. What's that supposed to mean? You know exactly what that's supposed to mean. The shopping. Jesus, Kristen, I can cut back all you want. But if I do, we won't have as much money, okay? She'd pout over that one. Seeing her pout, I'd try, every damn time, clueless that I was to point out reality to her. Of course, I'd continue. You could always go get a job yourself, you know? I mean, you've got a degree, but I'm not certified to teach in Florida. Then get certified. And when you do, I'll cut back and wheel. I don't want to teach Tyler, she'd say, usually in a louder voice. You know that. Then I'd try every argument I could think of. If she just got a job, she'd meet new people, make new friends, earn more money, not sit at home bored all day. I'd be able to cut back, and so on and so on. But my arguments fell on deaf ears. She wanted to have it both ways. She wanted to be taken care of, just like her dad had always taken care of her mom. But she wanted me home every night, too. She wanted the Ward and June Cleaver lifestyle, though considerably more high-end than little Beaver Cleaver had ever envisioned. And me? Well, I wanted to give her what she wanted. She was the one, the love of my life, the only girl I'd ever dated since we'd started going steady as sophomores. Through high school and college and on into marriage, we'd always been together. Everyone told us, right from the start, that we were the perfect couple. Smart, attractive, popular, outgoing. You remember us. The homecoming king and queen for whom everything always came easy. And, right up until our move to West Palm, everything always had come easy. Then I got into the real world of high finance, though, and found out it required hard work, and long hours, and making sacrifices. I was ready, willing, and able to make those sacrifices, though. I hadn't come from money. Both Mom and Dad worked their fingers to the bone to make sure Benny and I had everything while growing up. They made sure we had our own jobs, too. From 14 on, I'd cleaned the shop and sharpened the tools and stacked the lumber and done all of the other crappy jobs at Dad's custom cabinet making and woodworking shop. So I knew early on what it was to put in 12-hour days. Kristen never understood that, though. Her dad was president of Grant City Savings Bank, and she'd never had a job in her life. Come to think of it, I don't think her mom ever had a job either. And I know for a damn fact that her sister, Priscilla, never worked. Oh no, not pretty little Priscilla. She'd gotten her teaching degree and certificate, then married the first lawyer she could find. She was happy at home with her 4 children and her husband breaking his back to keep her happy. So yeah, you're right. I should have seen it coming from afar, but I didn't. So what are you gonna do? I mean, remember, we'd been together for 11 years. She was the only girl I'd ever dated, and I simply couldn't imagine a life without her. The situation became critical in year 4. Looking back on it, with my head finally out of my butt, I see now that I really missed my chance to save our marriage then. I want to go home for a few weeks, she said as I packed my suitcase for a trip to Vegas. When? Tomorrow, she said. When were you gonna be back? She shrugged. Dunno. Maybe a couple weeks. Maybe. Jesus, Tyler, you're gonna be gone for 10 days this time, and I'll be here. For 10 days. Alone. With nothing to do. Come on, Kristen, I said. Why don't you just get a... I'm not getting a goddamn job, she yelled. Get off it already. I don't want that. I want a family. Why can't we just start a family, Tyler? This argument had been going on for almost 2 years, too, but I didn't want to be an absentee dad. Can't you just wait a little longer? I pleaded. Let me get the second mortgage paid off and the first paid down some more. Then I'll be able to afford to cut back on the travel and the hours. Yeah, right. And what the hell am I supposed to do in the meantime? You could help is what you could do, I yelled, surprised at my sudden frustration. You could use your degree and get a goddamn job and maybe contribute instead of spending every goddamn dime I bust my butt for. Her initial shock turned to fury. Screw you, she said, stomping off. I'm going home to see my folks. I'll be back when I'm back. That first stay had lasted nearly a month. I tried calling her every day, but I was back home from my 10-day trip before I caught her at home. What are you doing that's keeping you so busy? I asked. You know, catching up with old friends. Spending time with Scylla and the kids. My attempts to get more detail, or to even try warming her up to me, were brushed off with vague answers and hollow professions of her love. I'd known it at the time, but was afraid to admit that my marriage may be crashing and burning. When I offered to take some time and fly up to see her and our families, she just ignored me, so I didn't. I was treated to the same cold shoulder the next time she flew home about 5 months later, too. 10 months after Kristen's first trip home, I returned from a small jaunt to Minneapolis, 5 days before Christmas, and I was taking the next 2 weeks off. Best of all, while in Minneapolis I'd snared Midland's Financial as a client, all but ensuring a steady stream of ongoing sales and probably a promotion to that most coveted vice president slot I'd been shooting for. The hours would still be long, probably 50 or more a week at least, but my out-of-town travel would all but disappear. And with the commensurate raise in pay, coupled with the commissions from sales to Midlands, now was the time to start that family. I've got a big surprise for you, I told her the night before on the phone. Kristen hadn't seemed all that thrilled, though. No anticipation, no trying to get it out of me. Nothing. Just, sure, Tyler. We'll talk when you get back. But we didn't talk. And we'd never be having that talk, I realized standing in my entry foyer and looking at my nearly empty living room. While I was gone, she'd gone about the business of getting gone herself. She'd left, without a word of warning. 2 weeks later, Sunday morning at 10, my phone rang. Hello? Ty, honey, what's going on? Hi, Mom, I said, deflating. It wasn't Kristen. I don't know what's happening. Kristen's gone. Why didn't you say anything last week? We spoke every Saturday or Sunday. Mom and Dad and me. Ty, she repeated. I don't know what's going on. She left. I came back from a work trip and she was gone. She's back home, Mom said, with her folks. I saw Dorothy at the store the other day. She told me. She tell you why? Give you a reason? Anything? No, honey. Just that Kristen was back home and living with them. What are you gonna do about it, boy? Dad barked on another line. Nothing, Dad. I mean, what can I do about it? Fly up there and beg her to come back? You've got to do something, don't you? Dad said. No, Dad. I don't. She's already done it. Made up her mind. Without even talking to me. So that's it? You're just gonna give up? I'm not giving up, I said, my voice getting hot. Edwin, Mom said, leave the boy alone. He's confused. Well, he needs to be unconfused, Dad argued. Dad, I said, settling down and trying to keep them from heating up their own argument. I came home from a trip. I was promoted. I wanted to tell her I'd be working less and we could start a family. Instead, I walked into an empty house. She was gone, along with most of the furniture. I'm sleeping on the goddamn love seat. Okay? No talk, no phone call, no note, nothing. Oh, honey, Mom pined. Dad said. So I'm pretty sure chasing her up to Grant City and begging her to come back would kind of be a waste of time, okay? I mean, she won't even return my calls. Dad and Mom sighed in unison. A week later, I was personally served with summons on Kristen's petition for dissolution of marriage. I think that's legalese for, I'm moving on, sucker. Let's cut to the chase on the divorce. Kristen filed for divorce in Lincoln County, Illinois, which is where we were from and where she was now back living with her folks. The thought of going back home for the divorce was galling, particularly where I'd be taking time off of work and she wasn't working at all. Thus, I sought and obtained a transfer of the action to Palm Beach County, Florida. That pissed her off, and she decided to hire a real shark. My shark was bigger, though, and she ended up getting a sound thrashing in the blindingly fast divorce action. It was all so simple, apparently, because we had only my one income, a house, no kids, minimal debt, and only a few healthy accounts. The lawyers hashed out nearly everything without the judge's involvement. Since she'd taken all of the furniture, she was ordered to pay the credit cards that were used to buy the furniture. That, of course, came out of her equal share of the equity in our marital residence, which had sold for top dollar 2 months after she left in the then-hot Florida real estate market. The only thing the judge needed to decide was alimony, so Kristen had to fly down and attend one session of court. I must say, the starchy, carbon-tense Midwestern diet didn't seem to be agreeing with her. She looked a little puffier than I remembered, maybe 15 pounds heavier. She definitely had the I hate you glare, though. Anyway, that alimony thing. Kristen sought $4,000 a month for 3 years, and then it would be reviewed. I sought no alimony at all. The judge, a crotchety old weasel with wisps of gray hairs shooting from his head, ears, nose, and eyebrows and a voice like a rasp, laughed out loud at Kristen's request and turned a sad eye to my refusal to pay anything. He gave her 1 year, $2,000 a month, and I'd never have to pay her another dime. Whatever. It was less than 10% of my take-home pay. When the bailiff called the recess signifying the end of our case, Kristen stormed from the courthouse without another word. Priscilla shot me a flaming stare, then hurried after her sister. I just stood there, still just as goddamned clueless as I'd been when first entering my empty house a mere 3 months before. No note, no email, no voicemail message. When I called to speak with her, she refused to talk with me. Nothing. More than a decade together, and I didn't even merit an explanation. Was I mad? Nope. I was tired, befuddled, confused, worn down by the whole sorry affair. What caused it? Barring her explanation, which she didn't seem to want to share with me, I was left to simple conjecture. She was lonely and away from her family. She was lonely with me working all the time. She wanted a family, and I wasn't ready yet. The sad part is that most of her loneliness had been cured the day I found out she left me. We could now have that family. I'd be home almost all the time. We'd be together more. Apparently, it was too little, too late. So there I stood, weary to the bone, watching that courtroom door close behind my ex-wife. The only woman I'd ever loved. The only woman I'd ever been with and ever wanted to be with. I felt a hand on my shoulder, a gentle weight. "Sorry, son," the judge said, now standing beside me. His voice was soft, like he could read my absolute emptiness. "It'll get better. Just give it time." I could only nod, not trusting myself to speak lest I cry like a babe. Suddenly single, albeit involuntarily, there seemed to be 3 paths open to me. First, I could go out and validate that I was still a great guy. To do that, of course, meant that I'd have to spend every waking hour trying to bang every chick in sight. This seemed to have its benefits, of course. Obviously, I'd be expanding my horizons sexually, which had its appeal. Let's face it, experience wasn't exactly my forte where I'd only been with one woman my entire life. What if I sucked and became a laughingstock? Second, I could bury myself in my work, in which case I'd probably make even more money that I didn't really need and guarantee absolutely no free time to try finding a life outside of work. Also, I'd only been working so hard to make ends meet and to give Kristen what I thought she'd wanted to be happy. Nevertheless, My old man always seemed to say it best. Do you want to work to live or live to work? Now that my salary was topping 300 grand a year, I decided to work to live. Third, I could just say hell with it. Quit my job, move, take up a whole new life. That also had a certain amount of appeal. Hell, who doesn't just want to shed everything that's wrong and start anew in some strange place with total strangers who don't serve as a constant reminder that you're a marital failure? It had a certain adventurous panache that appealed to me. You know, the Jack Kerouac thing. After long thought, at least the time it took me to drink 2 margaritas, I settled on a course of action. It was going to be all 3. I'd work my butt off and go somewhere new, start fresh. I'd be working my butt off on my college major, though. English, not sales or finance. You'd be amazed how many salesmen are English majors. I mean, other than teach, what the hell else do you do with an English degree? I wanted to write. I'd loved it in high school and college, but never had the time for it with marriage and work taking all of my energies. Well, there was no time better than the present, and it seemed the perfect way to get my mind off my life. So I'd spend every spare moment outside work writing. When writer's block hit, I'd go to clubs and try to get laid. No relationships, mind you. I was an emotional train wreck, and the thought of getting closer to a woman than hot, frantic sex made me want to barf. Still, hot, frantic sex sounded pretty good. I started that very night. I'll never forget it. Most people spend the day of their divorce getting drunk or trying to get laid, but I spent the rest of the afternoon in my apartment trying to come up with story ideas. What if this? What if that? What if a man's wife leaves him for no reason? Then she disappears, and no one knows where she is, and he's lost without her, and consumed with finding her, and is torn over whether she's been killed, kidnapped, or just plain run off. This guy, the poor bloke whose wife has run off. Let's make him A. Bond salesman? Too boring. A. Private investigator? Too cliche. A. Oh man, I'm close. A sheriff? Yeah, a small-town deputy sheriff. In a backwards nowhere, who's beaten down by his job and his existence, and the only bright, shining beacon in his universe is the wife who was always too good for him. Close. How about a police lieutenant? After all, it seemed far-fetched to think a sheriff could get a month off to find his wife. But where's he live and work? How about Rockford, Illinois, a bigger city of 150,000 or so, about 40 miles from Grant City? That seemed to work better. That's how it started, with a series of what-ifs, wild permutations of my own crazy situation, my own screwed-up what-if. What if the only woman you ever loved decides she no longer loves you, or loves someone else more, or maybe even never really loved you in the first place? 2 months into the outline, Mom called unexpectedly on a Tuesday night. She's getting married, Mom said, her voice sad. Kristen? I said, stunned she'd replaced me so fast. Kristen, Mom confirmed, to Randy Walters. The cop. The very same. That didn't take her long, I said. I guess it started even before she left you, Mom said. That's the talk anyways. They were hooking up when she started coming back here to visit her folks. Scumsucker. And, Mom said, pausing before rushing the rest out in a flurry, she's pregnant. I was thunderstruck. That cold, conniving, heartless, manipulative, vindictive, narcissistic, evil. Say something, honey. Mom interrupted my mental tirade with, what's to say? Dad cut in. Screw her. Edwin, Mom gasped. Dad almost never swore around Mom. Not unless he was seriously pissed. No, Mom, I said, gritting my teeth. Dad's right. Screw her. The phone was silent for a moment after Mom's second, and more audible, gasp at my profanity. So what do Dorothy and Laverne say about their little princess now? I said. They're upset, Mom said. Laverne's still acting like his shit don't stink, Dad cut in. But he's forcing it, Edwin. You saw it. And Dorothy couldn't even look anyone in the eye when she was talking about it. Good, I pronounced. Nice to see Kristen's now disappointed or hurt someone other than me, huh? No, Tyler, that's not good, Dad said, his voice going softer. That's not good at all. It's bad enough she hurt you, but heaping this embarrassment on her family only makes it worse. What's to be embarrassed about? I said. She's back home. They've got their precious little princess back in town, and now they can see her all the time. And their new baby with that prick Randy Walters. And they can continue, they and Priscilla, for that matter, they can continue to tell her about how special she is. And her brat, too. You're hurting, Tyler, Mom said. We know that. But don't let the anger turn to hatred. Don't let it eat you up, honey. Please, don't do that. That which doesn't kill us only makes us stronger, I said. Or rots us to the core, Dad added. But I didn't feel rotten to the core. Not even the littlest bit. No, Kristen was rotten to the core. I was just the dumbass who kept his head in the sand when all the signals were there. I was just the sap who was willing to look the other way so I could preserve something that was already spoiled. The good news was my alimony was going to be ending before the year was out. Apparently, her marriage terminated my maintenance payments effective the date she married the scumsucker. So there you go, Kristen. Suck on that. After that phone conversation, the outline took a darker turn than the initially planned happy ending. Way darker. 2 months later, writing like a demon possessed every night from 6 to midnight and from 10 to 4 or 5 on weekends, I had a complete outline of my first novel. The character biographies had been written while I was plodding through the outline, and they were continuously fleshed out as the outline progressed. Then, suddenly, there I sat. 10:30 at night all these months later, 9 months after she left me, 6 months after starting, with the outline complete. That's when I realized I hadn't been laid in more than 9 months. Hell, I hadn't even thought about getting laid. Now, though, with the first step in my new life done, I realized my balls were set to explode if relief wasn't coming soon. Pardon the pun. Either way, the actual writing would definitely have to wait another day or two. 10:30 seemed a bit late to be going out, but West Palm is a ritzy area with nightclubs galore and tons of young people. For whatever reason, none of which I could remember from when I was younger, the 25 and unders never bothered showing up until after 9. Thus, there seemed to be half a shot of getting laid on a Thursday night at 10:30. A half hour later found me in Matt's, a sports bar meets dance club with a packed parking lot. Working my way through the doors and to the bar, I was smiled at, given the glance, or lightly brushed by at least 10 good-looking chicks dressed to the nines and apparently bored with whomever else they were with. At least 3 of them had wedding rings, too, which almost made me bolt before my first beer. Finally, though, beer in hand, I made my way to a table near the dance floor. If nothing else, I could entertain myself watching men who thought they could dance jiggling out of beat with the slinky beach babes who seemed to be dancing with themselves in their own little worlds. Unfortunately, watching the gaggle of scantily clad women writhing on the floor with their faux hipster male companions drove home a simple point I'd previously overlooked. How the hell do I pick someone up? Remember, I'd only asked one person out on a date in my life. Kristen, almost 12 years before, while we were in high school, for Chrisake. Since that fateful day, I'd never needed to hit on another chick. Sure, there were the innocent flirtations with women in the office, but both sides knew that was going nowhere. Hell, I wouldn't even know the signals if they were in neon lights flashing in my goddamn face. Hello, a cool voice with soft southern accent said to my right, interrupting my thoughts. I turned. A deer in the headlights looked no doubt overtaking my features. She stifled a laugh at my reaction, then raised her eyebrows and nodded to the empty chair across from me. I looked from the chair to her, then back again. Oh, I said, standing so fast the table almost went over. Sure, please. Sorry. She didn't bother hiding her amusement now. First time here, she said, sliding into the chair across from me. I nodded. I'm Susan, she said, stretching her arm across the table. Tyler, I said, shaking her cool, surprisingly strong hand. She was tall, dark, and beautiful. Long, shining black hair framed a model's face with high cheekbones and full lips, bright green eyes sparkling in the dance lights. She appeared to be my age, 28 or so, give or take a few years, but her body was toned like a high school cheerleader with clear muscle definition. Her slinky, bright green dress showed off her flawless complexion, brilliant eyes, and killer body to perfection. Those eyes were appraising me now. So, Tyler, she said, sipping her drink through a straw while fixing me with her stare. What brings you out tonight? Her forthright demeanor was startling. It was clear what she wanted, and she was brazenly trying to find out if I was looking for the same thing. I think. I didn't. How long you been divorced? She said. That obvious? Afraid so. 6 months, I sighed, answering her initial question. 9 since she left, 6 since the divorce was done, and this is your first time out since? I nodded, trying to decide whether to get out before I made a bigger fool of myself. She must have been something, Susan continued. Most are out here within a week of the divorce. You waited 6 whole months. Hell, 9. Actually, yeah, well, I'm not really, you know? Been a long time since you've done this, right? She said. I nodded. And you have no idea anymore, right? Right. Okay, she said, finishing her drink before pushing it aside. Here's how it goes. You're pretty good looking, okay? I only stared at her in return, not sure whether to say anything. And I don't have a lot of time, she continued. So I'm gonna put it to you simply. You want to get out of here? My eyes went wide. It was simple as that? Just show up, be alone, and some goddess is going to pick me up and offer to screw me blind? She laughed, a deep, throaty laugh. I guess we can go through the formalities. You know, you buy me a few drinks and I play hard to get for an hour or so. Then we dance a few times. We start with the faster numbers and, finally, when the slow song hits, I make it known I'm available and interested. You prefer that? Well, what do you prefer? She laughed, pushing back her chair and standing. This is gonna be fun, she said, holding her hand out to mine, like with a virgin. She had no idea how close to the truth that was. Let's not waste any time with the formalities, she said. I've got to be to work early, so come on. We drove in separate cars to my place. Upon entering, she looked around. Nice. Better than most bachelor pads, particularly the divorced ones. As she spoke, I watched her slide her dress over her shoulders and to the floor. Well, she said, looking at me expectantly. I could only stare at her incredible body now clad only in a skimpy, matching white lace bra and panty set and high-heeled sandals. Her grin turned devilish. Like what you see? She walked to me, but I was too frozen to do anything but stare. You can say something, she said, leaning in and blowing a hint of a breeze into my ear. I won't bite. Yet. We had wild sex. A few minutes later she got up. Well, she said, gathering up her clothes as I still laid on the couch, watching her. Well, I agreed. She turned and smiled at me. I don't really. I've got court in the morning. Court? I said. Who had I just been banging? Charlie Manson's love child? I'm a lawyer, she said. My eyebrows shot up. A lawyer? Don't give me that look, she said. You of all people should know what it's like. Meaning what? Meaning, she said, looking at the stack of folders and printouts on my dining room table and covering most of my kitchen counter, that we both work high-pressure, long-hour jobs. I don't have the time for a relationship, okay? Doesn't mean I don't have needs. Like this. I smiled. I'm not judging you, Susan. Really. I mean, come on. Me of all people. Then why the look? She said, her dander going back to normal. Just surprised is all, I said. You know, you're beautiful. And now I find out afterwards, no less, that you're also intelligent and successful in everything. I mean, I've just never really done this before. I guess I just didn't expect it, you know? She nodded, then smiled. She stood, straightening her dress before walking to me and leaning over. Well, Tyler, whatever your last name is, you want to play this game, you might as well get used to surprises like this. She leaned in and kissed me on the lips. So that means, this is it, she said. Maybe we'll run into each other again. Maybe not. You know, play it by ear. Okay. I nodded, both upset and relieved at the same time. Upset because the whole thing felt somehow cheap and hollow. Relieved that she didn't expect anything more from me. It was another month before I could go out and again try to get laid. In the meantime, all of my spare hours away from work were spent in my den, writing and writing and writing some more. Though only a month had passed since the outline was finished, the writing came very quickly. I'd fleshed out the outline in great detail, so it was just a matter of filling in descriptive prose and dialogue, which seemed to fly from my fingertips, through the keyboard, and onto the screen. After a month, I was nearly a third of the way through the outline and my first completed novel. That's when my suppressed physical urges again reared their ugly head. It was a Saturday afternoon, a little past 4, and I'd been at the computer for almost 8 hours. Having just finished with a romantic flashback scene, I was feeling randy and couldn't get the images of sex from my mind. Feeling my enthusiasm for writing fade in direct proportion to my need to get boned, I saved my work and backed it up before hopping into the shower. The shower didn't help things at all. The images of sex, both with Kristen and, more vividly, with Susan, only served to increase my heartbeats. Deciding I didn't want to embarrass myself again should I manage to pick someone up, I took care of things in the shower and hoped it would tide me over. An hour out of the shower, though, I was still aroused. Deciding not to fight it, I dressed in a pair of khakis and a pale blue Oxford shirt with sandals and made my way back to Matt's. Cutting to the chase, I was there about 3 hours, going through the buying drinks and dancing thing, when I was leaving again, this time with a sizzling little Cuban named Sofia Martinez on my arm. Again, it was an evening of mind-blowing sex. Again, it ended when she pecked me on the lips, thanked me, and took off at midnight. The next morning over coffee, I stared out the sliding glass door of my apartment at the gray waters and skies over the Atlantic, contemplating my love life. A few things cropped up immediately. First, sex when you're single is way different than sex when you're married. Bachelor sex is way more selfish. From both sides. All I wanted to do was whatever it took to maximize my own pleasure. All Susan and Sophia had wanted to do was, likewise, maximize their own pleasure. Second, there was a lot more direction going on. Yeah, they both said more times than I could count, just like that. Or, there, right there. And of course, faster. After the first dozen or so times with Kristen, direction had been unnecessary. She had always sensed what I wanted, and I sure as hell knew how to push her buttons. Third, despite the selfishness on both sides, there was also a tentativeness, a hesitation to really go all out. If I do this, I'd thought several times, will she get pissed and leave? Will it kill the mood? Fourth, I hate condoms. Kristen and I had only used them the first year we were together, at which time she'd gone on the pill. There was never any fear of disease or pregnancy after that, so I hadn't sheathed up in more than a decade. Now, though, condoms were a must. Let's face it, both sides were sleeping around, and the thought of AIDS kept me conscious of the need for protection. Finally, the whole thing just seemed so impersonal. Almost like each side of the equation was just a flesh and bones sex doll, to be used for pleasure then cast aside like last year's Christmas present. The sex was certainly fun while it lasted, but the emotional toll afterwards almost canceled it out. Was I ever going to get used to this? On the other hand, there was no way I was going to be chasing after a real girlfriend or a real relationship anytime soon. Finishing my second cup of coffee, I reached my decision. My life was good right now. A little lonely to be sure, but still good. The book was progressing, work was going gangbusters, and I was getting laid when the pressures reached a crescendo. If mindless sex with strangers was the price to pay for everything else that was going well, then so be it. I vowed to set aside every Saturday night for myself and my efforts to get laid. Maybe I'd just get used to it, maybe I wouldn't. If it became too much, I'd just stop. I know. Some dilemma? Huh? A year ago, I was faced with marital sex with one woman for the rest of my life. I'll grant you she was, and still is, one hot woman, so that thought wasn't exactly beating me down. Still, wild unbridled sex with hordes of hot chicks is supposed to be every man's dream, right? So here I was. Something else I wished for, and when I got it, it wasn't all it was cracked up to be, but it was still better than my right hand. 5 months and about a dozen forgotten nights of sexual bliss later, I was done with my first ever novel. 350,000 plus words of a man's tortuous journey to find out where she went and why. Half mystery, half betrayal, half suspenseful thriller. If that sounds like too many halves, it's because there was a lot packed into this first novel. And it wasn't a first draft either. I'd edited it twice, getting rid of the typos, tightening up some scenes and expanding on others, changing some nuances of speech here and there and everywhere. It was another Saturday evening, a little past 7, and I just stared at the screen. What now? I said aloud, because I didn't know what to do now. Another night cruising for mindless sex with a hot beach bimbo seemed out of the question. The thought didn't even stir my loins, truth be told, and I realized that was now done. No more. Hell, I couldn't even remember half their names. After Susan and Sophia, there'd been that redhead with big mangoes, then the brunette with bigger melons, then another Cuban chick with dancer's legs and gymnastic flexibility, then some more chicks. Never the same one twice. Cruising for sex out of the question, I faced my more immediate problem. I've written a book, so what the hell do I do with it? Clueless, I started surfing the net. By the end of the weekend, I'd made a list of things to do, to see if I could get this behemoth that had taken 13 months of my life. Thing to do number 1, find an agent. Publishers rarely even look at manuscripts submitted cold, so I'd need an agent to read the book and, if it was good enough, market the thing to a publisher. I spent the next week drafting cover letters to 24 agents in New York, Miami, and Los Angeles. A copy of the manuscript went into each. Don't ask me how much it cost to make 40 copies of the manuscript. Just go buy stock in Kinko's, because they took a friggin' mint from me. Then I started writing another novel. It didn't come as quickly this time, though. It took me almost a month to get the complete list of what-ifs set up and answered to my satisfaction before I was ready to start the outline. The end of that month, having already received 11 rejection letters from a slew of agents, I decided to go out. No, not to get laid. Just go out and get something to eat and have a few margaritas and watch people have fun. Still alone, I see, the voice behind me said as sipped my second margarita. I didn't even need to turn around to know who it was. How are you, Susan? Very good, she said, snaking between the chairs and sitting opposite me. And I thought you'd forget. I smiled. Hard to forget your first time. She laughed. I flagged down a waitress, pointed to Susan and then to my nearly empty glass. The waitress only nodded before rushing to the bar to fill our drink order. Thank you, Susan said. She didn't look much different than when I'd seen her those many months before. Same killer body, encased this time in a tight white dress, and her dark hair seemed a little straighter and a little shorter. Otherwise, it was the same Susan. So what brings you here? I said, grinning and raising my eyebrows as I said it. She smiled and shrugged in return. Probably the same thing that brings you here. I shook my head. Not this time. I'm a little tired of that. Her eyebrows went up, her face saying she didn't really believe me. Seriously, I said. I just, guess I'm not really built that way. You seem built just fine, she said. Sure, I didn't just turn you off to the whole thing? I laughed. Oh no, I've had my share of others. And they were good, don't get me wrong. But, I don't know. I guess it's just not for me. Her face went soft, and she leaned over the table and placed her hand on mine. It was pretty obvious at the time. Tell you the truth, you're one of the good ones, you know? How so? You're marriage material. It's against your grain to just keep going with a string of different women. You need more. And you could tell that from just that one evening? She nodded. Even before we left here to go back to your place. Plain as the nose on your face, Tyler. You remember my name, I said, surprised. She laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. I don't remember a lot of the names. Your name, though, I remember. I felt puffed up by this. I was that good? She laughed, merriment and a twinge of regret in her eyes. In ways you'll never really know, babe. Yeah, you were and are that good. Our drinks arrived and we were silent for a few moments, sipping and watching the dance floor. Don't you have any friends around here? She said out of the blue. I was silent before answering, thinking about how to take the question. Some people I work with. We go out sometimes. After work, maybe a few house parties. She shook her head. Not like that. I mean friends, not just acquaintances you see every day and talk to about work and stuff. I mean buddies you watch football games with, go hunting with. People like that. I shook my head. Guess not. Pretty sad, she said. I mean, you're a nice guy. Easy to talk to. Seem to give a shit about people. So what are you doing when you're not working? I mean, you're not out chasing women anymore. What are you doing with all of your time? Writing, I said. Books. Just finished one a month or so back. You're a writer? I shook my head. Bond salesman. Vice president at McDaniel Smith. A bond salesman who writes books in his spare time, she said. A bit out of the ordinary. She pondered this, giving me an appraising look. So when do I get to read this book? She said. I laughed. Probably never. I doubt anyone's really going to publish it. Then why do it? Because I like writing. More than you like people? That was a tough question, and I mulled it over in my mind. When did this happen to me? I'd been surrounded by friends who were real friends, close friends, in high school and college. I didn't even know what any of them were doing anymore. We'd all lost touch. I'd lost touch. And when I was married, Kristen had seemed enough. Between work and home, I'd never had any real time to make friends. I'd been in Florida for more than 6 years, and I didn't have a damned friend for 500 miles. Sorry, Susan said after a few moments of silence. I tried to smile. No, that's okay. It just made me realize a few things. She tried to smile, but it was a sad smile. This isn't really going so well, is it? I smiled. It's going fine. Really? Let me get you another drink. If you're not in a hurry or anything. Sure, she said. I motioned for fresh drinks, and the waitress was back with them in a flash. So you're a lawyer, I said, breaking the silence. Uh-huh. You know any agents by chance? Maybe one that will give me at least a reading? A shot? I know. I was pushing it, but it seemed worth a shot, and her face told me she was mulling it over. Then a flash went across her eyes, and a few seconds later her lips broadened into a grin. A lascivious grin. I might, she said. What's it worth to you? I told you. I'm out of that game. She shrugged. Then what VE you got to offer to make it worth my while? Money? She shook her head. Got that. My undying gratitude? Not good enough. Dinner? You've already eaten. I looked at her. What's it going to cost me? Just tonight? She put on an exaggerated look of hurt. Am I that bad? I smiled. You know better than that. It's just that. The weekend, she said, her eyes fixing on mine. Starting right now? But it's already Saturday night. I said. So when you say the weekend, I mean, I want to actually sleep with you. In your bed. Wake up with you. I want to know what that's like, okay? And then spend tomorrow with you. Through dinner. But you could get that from half the guys here, I protested. But you're not half the guys here, she countered. I don't feel cheap when I'm with you, okay? I want to know what a guy like you. A guy who looks at me like something more than a receptacle to get his rocks off. What a guy like that is like to spend time with. You want a date, I said. She shook her head. Sorry, sport. My situation's not really changed much. I'm still on the road half the time and burning the midnight candles when I'm back at home base. So I'm not dating material. No, I just want to know, even if just for a day, what it is I'm giving up here. I thought about what she had said. Truth be told, I felt sorry for her. She was successful. That much was apparent in her jewelry and dress, which had to cost a pretty penny. And she was on the road to do her lawyering. So she had to be with a bigger firm that probably handled bigger clients and bigger cases. So she had achieved all of her dreams. And now she wanted to know what they had cost her. Frankly, I'd let her spend the night on these terms without the quid pro quo. Still, if she was willing to help me and all, does that make me a hooker? I could tell she was awake. Her breathing was softer and more rhythmic. None of the soft hum of her light snoring from only a few minutes before. She was laying on her side facing me, her long black hair cascading over her face and the pillow. I could still see her face through the soft tangle, though, and I watched her lips twitch and her eyes scrunch closed even more. Please tell me you're not watching me, she whispered. I'm not watching you, I said. She opened your eyes. Liar. You're just as beautiful this morning as you were last night. She snorted her disbelief. I'm serious, I said. So peaceful and quiet and calm. Her features softened. And last night, I continued. Well, let's just say you got some serious snoring in. It was like sleeping with a, well, ouch. She slapped the side of my head. Careful, Buster. We laughed together. Then I leaned in to kiss her. No, she said, backing away. I've got morning breath. Suit yourself, I said, sliding out of bed and moving toward the bathroom, done getting rid of 4 margaritas and the multiple glasses of water that had kept my energies going the night before. I started brushing my teeth. Mind if I join you, she said. I turned to see her standing in the doorway wearing one of my old sweatshirts, and nothing else. I waved her in before rinsing my mouth. Spare toothbrush in here, I said, opening a drawer and pointing at 5 toothbrushes still in their wrapping. Someone has a serious toothbrush fetish, she said, amongst other fetishes. Tell me about it, she laughed, her fingertips trailing to between her legs. She saw me looking, turned beet red, and jerked her hand away. We shared the sink, her flossing then brushing her teeth while I shaved. Then we showered. Together. And it was really, really, really nice. So, did we spend the whole day screwing each other silly? Sorry, that's pure fantasy. Instead, we spent the day walking the beach and having a burger at a beach shack for lunch. Then we went back to my apartment for a nap. We were both ready for the nap by the time it was over, and I spooned her as we slept. Her movement 2 hours later awoke me from a sound slumber filled with the happiest dreams I'd had in a long time. Peaceful dreams. Dreams that left me content when I awoke. When I opened my eyes, a lazy smile on my lips, Susan was sitting on the side of the bed staring at me. And she was sad. You ever wonder if you've made the wrong choices in life? Every day, I said. Not just the little things, she explained. I mean the big things. Things like, I know exactly what you mean, I said. And I've spent every day for the past year and a half wondering whether my great job and great pay were really worth it. She nodded, sympathy flooding her features before sadness returned. This was a mistake, she said. Why? Because, she said, before last night, I had these twinges, you know? These fleeting thoughts that there was more to life than just my career. Maybe a family. A husband I love. A tear trickled down her cheek. Waking up with someone I love and spending a day just like we spent today. She turned away, and I sat up and stroked her back. But now I know what I'm missing, she continued. It's like I've seen what I could have, but I can't really have it. It's not too late, you know, I said softly. You can still have those things. I mean, you're what? 26? 27? I'll be 30 in 3 weeks, she said. 30's the new 20, I said, pulling her back into me and holding her. I don't know you very well, but I do know at least a few things about you. Like what? She said, snuggling back into me as I brushed the tears from her face. Well, I know you can accomplish whatever you set your mind to. You've done it in your career so far, right? She nodded. Then you can learn to quit working so damned hard and make the adjustments and give yourself a chance to meet someone special, right? It's not that easy, she said. No, it's not. I'll give you that. It would probably mean you'd have to work somewhere else. For people who don't all work themselves to death 7 days a week. But there are places like that, right? Even lawyers, I suppose. She laughed, then her voice went soft. You make it sound so easy. I was silent for a minute. It's not. What's not? She said. It's not easy, I said. If it was, I'd have done it by now. In my own life. Is that why you're divorced? I didn't really know how to answer that. Frankly, I still wasn't sure why Kristen was gone. Sure, there was Randy Walters and now, their new baby. But which came first? Me working too much or Randy Walters? I don't really know, I finally answered. At least in part, I guess. Probably a large part. But I don't really think that was all of it. Susan turned and faced me, kissing me full on the lips before hugging me in a death grip. Well, she sure made one hell of a mistake. Tyler whatever yours. It's Collins, I said. Tyler Collins. And I'm Karapova, she said. Susan Karapova. I gave a mock gasp. You mean I'm sleeping with a commie? She giggled into my neck and pulled me back to her. The wall came down a while back, she said. Phew. I'm just saying, you know? Her giggling intensified. You shit. I made us a cheese omelet and toast for dinner, and we ate in near silence. But it was a comfortable silence broken only when the phone rang. Mom, I thought. I'd missed the call that morning. Hello? Tyler, Dad said, his voice choking. What's wrong, Dad? Your mother, he said. She's in the hospital. It's, you called Benny? He tried to choke out a no. I'll call him, I said. Then I'll get there as fast as I can. Hurry, he said. Please. I promise, I said, but he'd hung up. What's wrong? Susan asked as I turned to face her. My mom, I said. I don't know. I was choking up and scared. She was quick and confident in the crisis. Benny, your brother? I nodded. Call him, she instructed, pulling a cell phone from her purse and walking toward the bedroom. I'll book you a flight and get you packed. Chicago, I said. She turned and looked at me quizzically, and I repeated it. Fly me into Chicago. It's only an hour away. She nodded, punching numbers into her cell phone before wheeling and turning back to the bedroom. Your book, Susan said as she drove me to the airport. What? I replied, turning back to her. Your book, she repeated. Where is it? I only stared, not understanding. Her eyes were on the road, her face concentrating on the traffic, but I could see her features soften. I promised to get your book to an agent, she said. I'd like to keep my end of the bargain. You're kidding, right? I said. My mom's, well, it's real bad. Maybe worse than bad. And you're worried about our bargain? No, she said. I'm not really worried about it. And I know you sure have more important things. But while I'm down here, I want to do something for you, Tyler. Something to maybe, I don't know, maybe take some of the load off of you. To maybe give you something to keep your mind off things. She was crying now, and I don't know what else I can do. I just want to. There are some copies in my den, I said, fishing into my pockets for my apartment keys. I started pulling the front door key off the ring while I continued. They're in a box on the floor next to the computer. It's called Long Gone. She nodded, wiping the tears from her face and trying to smile. Okay, she said. I'll see what I can do. Thanks. And give me your cell phone, she said. Why? I'll program my number into it. Why don't you just give me your number and I'll do the programming, I said. You can concentrate on the road. She gave me her number and I dutifully typed it into my contacts list. You want my number too? I said. She nodded. A tight, brisk nod, like she was afraid to ask for my number. She handed me her iPhone and I added myself to her contacts. 10 minutes later, Susan saw me off at the post, 911 security lines. I hope it all works out, she said, hugging me tightly. Me too, I choked, hugging her back just as fiercely. Some date, huh? You sure know how to show a girl a good time, she said, tears welling into her eyes. I dabbed her eyes with my thumb. Thanks for everything, I said. You were a lifesaver tonight. And you were a lifesaver too. Maybe my whole life. I kissed her, got in line, and didn't look back. I didn't trust myself to look back. It was almost 2 in the morning by the time I drove my rental into Grant City. Since Dad wasn't answering at home, I drove straight to the hospital. Dad, Benny, and Benny's wife Maureen were all in the waiting room. They all rose upon seeing me, and we all hugged in turn. "It's a stroke," Benny said as we hugged. "How bad?" "Don't know yet," Dad said. "They're running a bunch of tests now. We won't know for a while yet." I nodded, then turned to Benny and Maureen. "Where are the kids?" "My sister has him," Maureen said. "She'll keep him until we know what's happening." And that was it. I couldn't think of anything else to say, and neither could anyone else. We were all just plain scared, and no one wanted to give voice to their fears. At a little past 4, a doctor strode into the waiting room. He was youngish, maybe a few years older than me at most, and he looked dog-tired. "How is she?" Dad said, getting to his feet with a burst of energy. The doctor's look was grim. "It was a stroke," he said. "A serious one." "What's that mean?" Benny said. "Is she gonna be all right?" The doctor looked at all of us. He sighed. "She'll live, but it's going to be a long, hard road." "I don't care," Dad said. The doctor looked at him. "She's going to have some serious physical impairments. Paralysis on the right side of her body. And speech. She'll need a lot of therapy, both speech and physical. But that'll fix it, right?" Dad said, the fear in his eyes. The doctor shook his head. "Not totally. I'm afraid a lot of it's going to be permanent." Dad looked like a balloon that had been pricked with a pin. He just slowly sagged back into the chair. "Don't get me wrong," the doctor rushed in. "She's still sharp as a tack, and she'll regain her speech with time, though it won't be as fast as it used to be, and she'll be able to walk again. It'll just be with a limp." Dad looked up at him, his eyes pleading. Benny put his hand on Dad's knee. "She'll get better, Dad." I put my hand on his shoulder. "She's a fighter." Dad tried to laugh through his pain and fear. "She is that," he agreed. "She'll get better. You just watch." The doctor's face said he doubted that, but he had the sense and compassion to just nod. 2 days later, Benny, Maureen, and I were sitting around the dining room table, drinking our morning coffee. Dad was already at the hospital, making the arrangements for Mom to go to a care facility for the initial. And we were told very intense physical therapy. I caught Benny and Maureen shooting glances at me and then at each other, Maureen raising her eyebrows and nodding her head toward me. "What?" I said, looking at her. "Just say it." Benny cleared his throat. Well, Ty. Someone's gonna have to stick around here for a while," Maureen said, flustered with Benny's attempt to state the obvious that had been hanging over our heads for the past 2 days. I nodded. "I know. Dad can't really take care of himself," Benny added. "Can't cook for shit," I agreed. "And probably has no clue how to run a washer or dryer either," Maureen added. "And he's gonna be real busy going to and from the therapy center and all," Benny piled on. "Guys," I said, "you don't have to convince me." "I know." "Well," Benny started, then stopped, unsure how to continue. "I've got a lot of time off coming," I said. The relief was evident in his face. "Don't worry," I continued. "I'll stick around for a while." "You always were a lot better in the workshop," Maureen said. "The workshop?" I said. "Yeah," Benny explained. "Someone's gonna have to keep the orders filled, right? It's not like Dad can just drop everything. At least, I don't think they've got that much saved up." I hadn't really thought about this part of it. Made sense, though. Someone had to make the cabinets and the occasional custom tables and chairs, dressers and bookcases. And they were right. Benny would lose fingers within a week. A complete klutz. "You're right," I said. When Dad came home that night, we went out back to the pole barn that served as his workshop and the rest of the cabinet making and woodworking business, for that matter. "You'll need to keep orders filled," I explained on the way out. "Yeah," he sighed, not really caring. "So why don't you show me what's in the hopper and I'll start first thing tomorrow." He stopped, turned, and fixed me with a stare. I had his attention, that's for sure. "You even remember how to do any of this? How to work with your hands?" "It'll come back," I promised. He moved his mouth, grinding his teeth as he thought it over. "I'll stay home tomorrow," he said. "Go over everything and keep an eye on you. See if you've still got it." I smiled. "Fair enough. Benny and Mo can be with your mom. She'll like that. Get you out of her hair for a while." He nodded. And we proceeded to the workshop and went over the orders that needed to be filled, the plans that needed to be completed, the billing that needed doing, and all the other things that go into running your own little business. After more than 6 years dealing with far larger figures, the business end of things didn't really intimidate me much. Looking at some of the pieces sitting around in various stages of completion, though, left me in awe. The tight joinery and sculpted flow of the furniture started me sweating, and the hand-cut dovetails on the drawers and casework scared the shit out of me. I hadn't done a hand-cut dovetail joint in more than 7 years, but I remembered how long it took me to originally master the art. Maybe we could just hire someone? I thought. Sam, I said into the phone, I'm gonna need some serious time off. What? He was apoplectic, as I knew he would be. Sam Runyon was the senior vice president/bonds at McDaniel Smith, and the thought of time off was contrary to the fiber of his very being. It's my mother, I explained. She's had a stroke. She okay? He said, still gruff. No, Sam, she's not okay. She's pretty messed up. She's not going to die or anything, is she? No, she's not going to die, I said. Then what's the problem? My dad, I explained. He needs someone around for a while until she's out of inpatient therapy. Like how long? Like a month. A month, he wailed, half sorrow, half unbelieving. Maybe more, I said. More than a month, he bemoaned. It's not like… I don't know, Collins. Really, you're asking a lot here. That pissed me off. I'd given my everything to these pricks, and now they're pissed off I needed to take care of my folks? You're kidding me, right? Sorry, I said, biting my tongue. I can't really get out of this. I'm gonna have to run it by the higher-ups, he said. It's not that simple. I mean, you need a week. Sure, you got it. 2 weeks? Yeah, we should be able to cover. But a month? I mean, I'm not asking you, Sam, I said, my voice getting firm as I struggled to keep from exploding. I'm telling you, okay? He paused, undoubtedly surprised that anyone would so blatantly challenge his authority. Do you know what you're saying? He said. That maybe you're giving up your current position? You want that? I don't really have a choice, I said. This is my parents we're talking about here, not some goddamn sick dog or something. And what are we supposed to do while you're gone? Who's supposed to cover for you? That's not my problem. It sure as goddamned hell is your problem, Collins. This is your department. You answer for it. So I should what? I exploded. Just say, hey, sorry mom and dad. Can't help out here. Hope you don't lose everything and all. Be sure to write at Christmas. Oh, and mom? You get well, sweetie. Huh, is that what you're saying I should do here? I don't really give a shit what you do, Collins, he snapped, his voice getting harder. I'm just saying it's not my problem. Not McDaniel Smith's problem. Got it? Loud and clear, Sam, I said before I'd even thought about it. And Bonds isn't my problem right now, either. What's that supposed to mean? He demanded. I thought for a moment before answering. These maggots had already gone a long way toward destroying my marriage, granted with plenty of help from Kristen and me, and they demanded hours that slaves would revolt over in pursuit of the almighty dollar. Now they wanted me to just abandon the only family I had left? That means 2 things, Sam, I said. First, it means I resign. Effective immediately. I heard him suck in his breath. Then he got control of himself. You said 2 things, he said slowly. The second thing is my severance package, I said. I want $250. You're nuts, he exploded into the phone. You're quitting on us. We're not firing you. And you're doing it with no notice. And we should pay you for this? Read my employment contract, Sam, I said. We're 9 months into the fiscal year, and I've accrued 60 days in vacation that you can't really deny me. So you're going to pay me for the vacation time I've earned, and you're going to pay me $250,000 on top, as severance pay. And if we refuse, he said, knowing better than to bluster his way into a corner without the full threat before him. 2 things. First, I'll just take my 60 days of vacation, and there ain't shit you can do about it. Then I'll come back for the last 30 days and resign the second the fiscal year is up, in which case you'll still owe me my bonus. Second, I'll call Carl Stepford over at Midlands Financial. I'll tell him all about leaving you guys and why, and I'll snag them for someone else. You wouldn't dare, he gasped, genuinely amazed at my complete prickishness. The hell I wouldn't, I said. You owe me at least $190 for the bonus, and you'll be making money off Midlands long after I'm gone. Let me get back to you, he said. 20 minutes later, my cell rang. That didn't take too long, Sam, I said. It's not Sam, a measured baritone voice said into a speakerphone on the other end. It's Bertram McReynolds. Oh, Mr. McReynolds, I said, surprised the head of McDaniel Smith himself was calling. There seems to have been an unfortunate misunderstanding, Tyler, he said. How so, sir? I think Mr. Runyon may have jumped the gun a bit, Tyler. Maybe been a bit too harsh. I smiled, deciding to say nothing in response. Are you still there? Still here, sir. What I'm saying, Tyler, is that you have 60 days of vacation coming. 60 days you've broken your back to earn. And if you need to take that time to be with your family, then we're all for it. Your job will be waiting when you get back, okay? I don't know, Mr. McReynolds, I said, knowing how I was going to play this. I mean, he seemed awfully sure about the firm's position. I speak for this firm, Mr. Collins, McReynolds thundered. There was a pause, and when he spoke next his voice was more gentle. We're really sorry to hear about your mother, son. And I don't turn my back on our valuable employees in their times of need. So if you need to take the time, then please take it. Sorry, sir, I said. I'm not coming back. I could picture poor Sam Runyon sitting across from McReynolds at this very moment, shrinking from the glare that was undoubtedly scorching his skin. But here's what I'm willing to do, sir, I continued. You approve the severance package I asked for, and I'll make sure you keep Midlands through the transition. Let's face it, folks, Bertram McReynolds didn't give two shits about me or my mom. He wanted to keep Midlands. All right, Tyler, he said warily. We're listening. You appoint my replacement. Then you send him or her and Sam up to get me in Chicago. I'll go with them to Midlands and introduce everyone all around. I'll stick to the sob story of why I'm leaving despite your best efforts to help me out. And I'll ease the transition. I'll make sure they think you guys are still golden. There was some hissed whispering on the other end. Then McReynolds spoke again. I'm not so sure Mr. Runyon is the right person to accompany you, he said. We're afraid there'll be... I knew what he was going to say, and I decided to let Runyon off the hook. He'd always been good to me, even if he had worked me half to death for 6 years. He'd kept up his end of the bargain, but he was a company man. I knew how he'd react to my requested time off. I just didn't know it would kick me in the butt to move on with my life for good. Mr. McReynolds, I interrupted. Sam Runyon is the best damned boss a man could have. I'm not mad at him, and I bear him no ill will. He's great at his job, and our earlier, disagreement has nothing to do with why I'm leaving. McReynolds cleared his throat. Oh, well, Tyler. Sir, you sure you won't be changing your mind about this? I'm sure, sir. There was some more hushed whispering on the other end. We'll get the vacation pay direct deposited into your account by close of business today, he said. And we'll email you a severance agreement to review. If it meets with your approval, we'll pay you the $250 at the end of the trip to Midlands, okay? Half now, half at the end, I said. And a guarantee that the trip is scheduled within 45 days. Smart boy, he chortled. And done. We've got a deal? It's a deal, sir, I said. And Tyler? Sir, we really are sorry, both about your mother and to see you go. Thank you, sir. 2 weeks later, I spent a Thursday and half a Friday in Minneapolis securing the Midlands account for my former employers. By the following Monday, the balance of my severance package was in my bank account. So what the hell was I going to do? Not a clue. That little phone call ensured I wouldn't have to worry about money anytime soon, though. With my savings, stock options, and even after taxes, the severance pay and vacation pay, I had a tidy little nest egg of almost 700 grand. Maybe not enough for the high life in West Palm Beach, Florida, but more than enough in Grant City, Illinois. In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king, and things were a whole lot cheaper in Grant City than in West Palm. So I had plenty of time to figure out what to do with my life, and how to get my stuff from West Palm to Grant City. Susan? I said, calling the only person I really knew in Florida. It helped, too, that she had the key to my apartment. How's your mother? She asked. Better, I said. A stroke. Pretty bad one, too. But she's getting better now. Thanks for asking. I could hear the exhalation that told me she actually gave a shit about the mother of a man she'd only spent 2 nights with. I was wondering if you could do me a favor? The book, she said. I paused, having forgotten all about it. No, it's a little more important than... I don't think anything's more important than getting it published, she said, her voice getting excited. Jesus, Tyler, it's brilliant. You read it? Of course I read it, Susan said. You think I'm gonna just pawn it off without seeing if it was any good? I chortled, pleased with myself. And you liked it? Loved it, she said. And I've already sent it along to my friend. She should be getting it today or tomorrow. Well, thanks, I said. Both the praise and her keeping the promise I'd totally forgotten about were more than I'd expected. If I'd even remembered about the book, that is. So, she said, you called? Yeah. Listen, I'm gonna be moving up here for a while. Susan was silent. Disappointed? I couldn't tell. Mom's in a rehab center, I said after a moment. Dad's got his own business, and he needs help running it right now. What about your brother? Bobby, or whatever his name is. Benny, I corrected. He's married. Kids. He is 4 hours away by car. She was silent again. And I need some help getting my stuff up here, I continued. You have my key and all. I was just thinking. Sure, Tyler, she said, her voice soft. You know that. What do I need to do? Let me make a few calls, I replied. See who I can hire. Once I get someone lined up, I'll give you a call. You can probably just drop the key off with him or something. Sure, she said, trying to project a chipper mood. No prob. Anything? What's wrong? I said, nothing. Come on, I can tell. You. I don't know. I mean, yeah, she sighed. Just that. Yeah, said it all. She was interested in me, cared for me, maybe wanted to make a go of trying to date me. Sorry, I said. What else could I say? Don't be. She tried laughing, but failed. Shit happens, right? Guess so, I agreed. And it was only a few days, right? Maybe the first time, I said, sadness overwhelming me. Not the second time, though. So there could have been more? I told you. You're special, smart, nice, beautiful, with a career. And 1,000 miles away, I added. So you've quit, she asked. Your job? Uh-huh. The silence lingered. 10 seconds. 20. Get me the number, she said. Whoever you hire. I'll make sure it all gets back to you, okay? Thanks, Susan. And be looking for a call from an agent, okay? Her name's Natalie. I will. And Tyler, she said. I could hear her sniffling, like she was about to cry if she wasn't already. Yeah, babe. You take care of yourself, okay? You too. She hung up. 2 weeks later, mid-June, my car, furniture, and all personal belongings were safely delivered from Florida. All but the car, my clothes, and my computer were safely put into a storage garage until I could find a place of my own, which wouldn't happen until after Mom came home from rehab. A quick online search netted me the address of Susan's employer ID, never gotten her home address, and I sent her a set of diamond earrings for all of her help. She called to protest, but I wouldn't hear of it. She'd been there when I needed her, which was far more than I was entitled to expect. I was working 12 hours a day in the workshop, sometimes with Dad, but usually alone. My woodworking skills had returned mostly. With Dad's occasional help, I was keeping up with the orders and putting out high-quality furniture and cabinets. Dad only had to fix a few glaring blunders. But what did he expect? If nothing else, he was getting far better quality than he was paying me for, which was zero. It was mid-morning, and I decided to take a break from some dovetails on a set of drawers for a queen and lowboy I was making out of quilted maple. Sipping coffee, I pulled out my cell phone and saw a voicemail message. Mr. Collins, a husky woman's voice said, "This is Natalie Jagosinski. A mutual friend of ours has passed along something you wrote. I've read it, and I'd like to meet with you to discuss some things. Please give me a call at your earliest opportunity." She gave a number, so I called her back. South Beach Talent, a chirpy voice answered. "I'm returning Ms. Jagosinski's call," I said. "May I tell her who's calling?" "Tyler Collins." One moment. 30 seconds later, the husky voice came back on the line. "Tyler," she said, her voice loud and cheery. "Yes, ma'am." "Natalie," she said. "Call me Natalie." "Okay," I replied. "Natalie, you called? Wanted to meet with me? Like yesterday. So you've read Long Gone?" "Read it and loved it," she gushed. "It was wonderful." She stretched out the N in wonderful. It came across as wonderful. "Thanks. So you think, maybe someone, you think I can get it published?" She laughed. A phlegmy, coughing laugh. A laugh coated in cigarettes and scotch. "No, darling," she said. "You can't get it published. But I can." I smiled. "Okay, then what do we do?" "Well, the first thing we do is sign you up. To our agency." "And how do we do that?" "You have a fax? Internet connection?" "Both," I said. "Give me your email. I'll send along the standard agent's agreement. You look at it, make sure it's kosher, then sign it and overnight it back to me." "Okay." I thought about it. My research had told me what agents charged, but I wasn't a lawyer. I wouldn't know what half the damn thing said. "Can you copy Susan on it?" I asked. "On the email? Susan Karapova?" "Of course, darling," she said. "Good idea. She gonna be representing you from now on?" "Don't know. I'll have to ask her." "Consider it done," she said. At least she didn't seem set on screwing me. If she was, she'd have probably tried to talk me out of the whole lawyer thing. But her compliance had been immediate and perfunctory. "You met with any other agents yet?" she continued. "No." "Good," she gushed, the relief evident in her enthusiasm. "Then, if you don't mind, I'll start shopping this to some publishers." "Before we're signed up together?" I said. You gonna screw me, Tyler? She asked. No. Then I'm not gonna screw you, okay? And we need to get moving on this. We can have it out by Christmas, which is perfect. So you think it's good? I asked again. No, Tyler. I think it's absolutely 100% brilliant. I think it'll be a bestseller, maybe even win a few awards. So the sooner it's published, the better. I was amazed. I mean, sure, I'd killed myself writing it, but still, it was my first book. Of course, Natalie said, interrupting my thoughts, you'll need an editor. There's some places that need some work and all, but that's common. The editor will know where and what to do. An editor? The publishing house usually assigns one, she said. They always do. I hadn't thought about that. Apparently, even brilliant first books still need work, the work of a more professional eye. Well, I said, whatever you think is best, I guess. I mean, I'm new to this and all. Okay, she said, pausing before continuing. What? I said, what are you? Well, she said, drawing it out, there's a freelance editor near you. In Chicago. We could hire her, then get reimbursed. That's kosher? There's a chance they won't agree to reimburse, in which case you'd have to pay it from your share of royalties. Maybe as much as 10 for 15 grand. But it'll get the book out sooner, right? In time for Christmas, she said. Then it'll be worth it, right? Probably. Then do it. I'll get right on it, she sighed. Okay, you get that email opened, print it, go over it with Susan, or whoever you hire. Sign it and get it back to me. I'll get to work getting this published, okay? Okay, I said, then thought again about the message. Do we need to meet, though? But she'd already hung up. I guess meeting with me wasn't in the cards, which was fine. I didn't want to go back to Florida just yet. Early the next afternoon, Susan phoned. The proposed agent agreement was fine, she said. So, I signed it. I somehow felt more like a real writer. Come on, I had an agent, right? The 4th of July that year fell on a Friday. Therefore, Thursday night became the busy bar night with old classmates and friends and family all flying in from out of town to see their long-lost loved ones. And I was tired of writing nights, even though the new outline was cruising along well and almost done. Though it had originally come faster than the original story, I was now making it more complex, adding additional layers to the story. So, I figured, what the hell? Dad was visiting Mom, and he'd grab a bite to eat on his way home. It was almost 7:30, and I was in the mood for some companionship. A few beers at the bar and grill sounded perfect. So by 8, I was showered, shaved, dressed in clean shorts and golf shirt, and pulling into the overflowing parking lot of the bar and grill. There are 3 types of people in Grant City. Those that go to the bar and grill, those that go to the hitching rail, and those that go to the other bars. Combine all the other bars, though, and they don't do nearly the business as either the bar and grill or the hitching rail. That's mostly because of the food at the 2 hot spots, though. The bar and grill definitely has better food. Hell, everyone knows that and pretty much agrees on that. Still, sometimes you're just in the mood for a really good greasy burger with a pile of skinny, salty fries, and that's when the hitching rail comes in. Also, the hitching rail has live bands a couple of times a month, and you can still see some of the fellas from General Beauregard dropping by when they're not touring or in the studio. So, like I said, they both have their adherents. I'm a bar and grill guy. I like the food because it's lighter and a bit fancier. Definitely not your normal pub grub. Mostly, though, I prefer the ambience. It's got a jukebox, to be sure, but it's rarely blaring too loudly and the tables are spaced enough to give you some room. I prefer a quieter joint where the bartender leaves me alone if I want to be left alone. The place was packed to the rafters tonight, though, just as I knew would happen. There were a ton of classmates from different years standing around tables, sharing pitchers of beer, and catching up on their families and careers or just talking old times. The dining room was full, too, and I was quick to put my name in for a table. Need some company for dinner? A voice behind me said. Allie, I said without turning around. The same, she said, leaning over my shoulder and pecking my earlobe with her soft lips. I turned and took her in. Allison Palmer, Kristen's cousin, the prettiest of the Palmer girls, and there were a lot of pretty ones. Everyone in Grant City had been saying for years that old Grandpa Palmer should have been put out to stud because all the female progeny in his line were such incredibly beautiful specimens of the female form. You look great, I said, staring at her smiling face and twinkling hazel eyes. You too, handsome, she said, taking a sip from her bottle of Corona, but keeping her eyes on me the whole time. Still single? Uh-huh, she said, and fishing for a dinner date. I smiled. There'd be a damned line in here a mile long if that were the case. I'm giving you first shot, she said, her eyebrow raising at the invitation. I kept smiling, but my mind started churning a mile a minute. Back a couple of months, and I'm facing my ex-wife's cousin trying to snag me. Don't get me wrong, she was drop-dead gorgeous, but this just didn't seem like a really good idea. You're single, she said, pushing her attack. She left you, not the other way around. So that means you're available and free to go out with anyone you want. Yeah, but your father. Her father. She laughed, flashing straight, impossibly bright teeth as she did so. And she had Kristen's dimples when she smiled, I noticed. And Kristen's look. The Palmer girl look. A look of sexual invitation that was hard to resist. I'm not asking you to a family reunion, Tyler, she said, holding her beer out to me. I took a gulp, closing my eyes and enjoying the ice-cold, lime-tinged beer as it chased down my throat. This wasn't a really good idea. Sure, I said. I'd love to have dinner with you, Allie. We chatted easily, both while waiting for our table, then over dinner. It was easy. After all, we'd known each other most of our lives. We'd been at the same Christmas parties, Thanksgiving dinners, picnics, family reunions, and cookouts for nearly a decade. She was only a year behind me in school, and we'd pretty much run around with the same crowd. So we had plenty to talk about. Thank God she waited until after dinner while we shared a bowl of Cherry's Jubilee over vanilla ice cream to bring up the ex. She's miserable, you know? Who? I said. Kristen. I didn't say anything. They're stuck in this crappy little two-bedroom condo over on Adams, she continued. His from before they got married. It's small and crappy, and she's home alone with the baby all day and nothing to do. Not enough money and all. Her problem, I said. She made her bed. She said you were ignoring her, Allison prodded. You were gone all the time. On business. Working forever. And she was always home alone with no friends and nothing to do. Then she should have gotten off her but ain't gotten a job, I said, trying to restrain my anger. You're right, Allison agreed. I'd rather not talk about her, I said. Just thought you'd want to know. She screwed the pooch, and she damned well knows it. Good. So, she said, scooping a cherry onto her spoon and looking at it before looking at me. Now that you're back and all, now that you don't have that high-pressure job 1,000 miles away. Yeah, I said, urging her to finish the thought. Well, she said, you thinking of maybe trying to win her back? You're kidding, right? She raised her right eyebrow in a mixture of surprise and joy. Not a chance in hell, I said. She's married now, with his kid. So like I said, she made her bed. So if she was married, but it was your kid? I stared at her. What's the difference? It's not. And she already found her knight in shining armor. They can have each other. I've got an idea, she said. I'm all ears. What say we mosey on up to the bar? Maybe have a few more drinks. Sounds great, I said. Then, she said, leaning in closer, we can go back to my place for a while. Here it was. The moment of decision. The second where I can either do the smart thing, or I can accept her invitation. Sounds like a plan, I whispered. You sure? Because you don't sound so sure, Tyler. I smiled. Positive. What can I say? I'm a man, right? Flesh and blood. Allie had a small home on Polk Street, over on the north side of town. She taught English at Grant City High, so she didn't make a ton of money. Then again, she'd never been married and had no children. So she only had herself and her home to spend her money on. The home was neat, tastefully decorated, and loaded with pictures of the many generations and branches of the Palmer clan. Just looking at the pictures of all those beautiful female cousins would get a dead man aroused. What got me aroused, though, was Allie's actions the moment we walked in the door. She led the way, me following close behind until I ran into her in the dark living room. I've wanted this for a long time, she said, snaking her arms around my neck and pulling me in for a kiss. It was a long, soulful kiss. The kind that say we've got all night, so let's take our time. You know the type. Lips brushing then pressing, the tip of a tongue tracing around the lips then slowly seeking out another tongue. Heads tilting back and forth as the passion heats up. A barn-burner kiss, the kind that turns a half-hard pecker into a full-blown diamond cutter. We kissed for ages. It could have been 10 minutes, could have been 10 hours. I was lost in her passion and my need. She looked so much like Kristen, but I kept that out of my mind. This was Allison, sweet little Allison, and she'd wanted me forever. Said so herself. That seemed good enough, and it was far different from the others I'd spent anonymous evenings with over the past year or more. All except Susan, but I banished her from my mind and concentrated on the excitement of the now. I want you, she mumbled as kissed her. How? I asked, unsure as I always was the first time. However, you want, she whispered into my ear, opening up worlds of possibilities. I want you to tell me what you want, I managed to say. Just do what you want, she said. Anything. We had wild sex. Once we were done, we lay beside each other. What the hell was she thinking? Allie whispered into my ear. Let's not talk about her right now, I said, enjoying the feeling of her heartbeat. I spent the night at her house, snuggling close in her bed and enjoying the feeling of a warm, soft body to wake up with in the morning. And she was up before I was, which was a reversal of roles for me. I'm usually up with the sun, which comes up pretty early in July. Breakfast, she said from the doorway. I'd been awake when she'd slipped out of bed, but I just wanted to linger for a few minutes more. Eggs? Pancakes? I smiled as I opened my eyes and saw her standing in a short t-shirt and nothing else in the doorway. Oh no, she said. Not that, Tyler. Come on, I pleaded. I was there for you when... I'm gonna be walking funny as it is, she said. You gave it quite a workout last night. I pouted, to which she smiled. Then her smile turned into a grin. Then the right eyebrow went up and she lost the shirt as she strode toward the bed. And a half hour later, I'd been introduced to the best way in the world to start your day. 2 days later, I was in the Piggly Wiggly, looking at watermelons, when I heard her voice behind me. Was screwing my cousin supposed to be some sick, twisted way of getting back at me? I didn't bother turning around. I'm talking to you, Kristen said. And I'm shopping here, I said, picking out a watermelon and placing it in the cart. Good to see you. Have a nice day. She had a little boy with her, not even a year old. He was cute and chubby with blonde hair and striking blue eyes. He looked at me in befuddlement, and I smiled at him in return. A smile broke across his face, and spittle dribbled at the corners of his mouth. Hey, handsome, I said softly. He flailed his arms in response, and the smile got bigger. Kristen looked from me to her son, then back and forth between us a couple of times. Well, she insisted. I don't know what you're talking about, I replied, waving goodbye to the toddler before turning to my car and pushing it toward the bakery section. She followed me. She couldn't wait to tell me, Kristen said. And Scylla, for that matter. And? That's my fault, how? Jesus, Tyler, she's my cousin, she said as I picked through the loaves of French bread, looking for one slightly stale. Tomatoes were coming in early this year, and I wanted a tomato, basil, and bread salad, drizzled with a fruity extra virgin olive oil, for dinner. It goes perfectly with beer and chicken on the grill. So? I said, putting a loaf of 2-day-old bread in my cart before wheeling toward the meat aisle. Still she followed, getting exasperated by my nonchalance. You stay away from her, Kristen said. There's plenty of single women in Grant City for you. I think you can stay away from my family, for Chris' sakes. No, I said, looking at the chickens. What? I picked a chicken, put it in my cart, and turned to face her. I said no. She glared at me, but I kept my face impassive. You gave up the right to tell me who to date, I said evenly. It's not your business, so stay out of it. But Allie made it my business, Kristen fumed. So now it's out in the open. I shrugged. Bound to happen sooner or later, I guess. And you think this is cute? Rubbing it in my nose like this? I'm not rubbing anything in your nose, Kristen, I said, placing my hands on the cart and wheeling toward the checkout lanes. Tyler, she said behind me, but I ignored her. I had chicken to grill and a tomato bread salad to make, and Allie was coming over for dinner. It was mid-July before I heard back from Natalie. Well, that didn't take very long, she said from her air-conditioned office in Florida. What didn't take very long? I asked. Selling the book. I was speechless. She'd found a publisher? In what? Not even a month. You still there, she said, laughing. Who bought it? The publishing rights or the movie rights? Movie rights. I said. Someone was going to make a movie out of my book? She laughed, then choked on the cigarette she must have been inhaling during her laugh. Settle down, kid, she said. No one's bought it yet. I felt like a deflated balloon. Pop. That fast. We're in the middle of a bidding war, she continued. Which is, when something's real good, when they think it's really gonna take off, the publishers all bid on the book. Then I go back to them, kind of like an auction through 5 or 6 dozen phone calls. And this is good? Oh yeah, she gasped, coughing again. It's real good. And the movie thing? Same deal. For different producers are bidding on the option. Option? Yeah. The book takes off, becomes a hit, they can exercise their option to buy the film rights. How'd they hear about the book? I said. Find out it was, well, worth a damn? They have people at the publishing houses that keep him in the loop. So what are we talking here? I said. Money? I was silent, afraid to say more. Well, kiddo, she said, her voice getting serious, you'd better please tell me you're already working on something else. Almost done with the outline, I said. And it's a Lieutenant Randolph thriller? Actually, I said, it is. I liked him. He's a good character. I could hear her sigh of relief through the phone. Thank you, God, she said. That's going to drive up the bidding. Why? Because, Natalie replied, everyone agreed he's a great character. Complex, sullen, but likable. And smart as a whip and manly too. That helps sell this to the female crowd. Oh, I said, not really understanding. And, she continued, just like in the movies, publishers want to bank on a proven star. They like series books. You know, Jack Reacher, Inspector Rebus, Hercule Poirot. Just like we've now seen, what, about 1,000,000 Friday the 13th movies? Oh, I said, getting it now. Well, that shouldn't be a problem. Good. So, I said, again afraid to ask. Well, she said, choosing her words carefully, if it comes down the way it's looking, you're gonna be doing nothing but writing about our little friend Lieutenant Randolph for a long time. They're talking a 3-book deal. And you're gonna be a millionaire, Natalie said. Several times over if they make any movies from the books. My eyes damned near bugged out of my head at that one. Sure, I knew it was lucrative if you reached the bestseller list. Still, a millionaire right off the bat? So get your butt moving on that outline, okay? Sure thing, boss. And one other thing, she said. What? I've got your editor, the one in Chicago, lined up to help you with this. Oh, yep. So who is he? She, Natalie corrected me. She's from Chicago. We use her sometimes. I'll give her your number. You get together with her. Quick as you can. You two get this into final form as soon as possible, okay? Sure, I said. Okay then, Natalie said with finality. Wait, I said before she could hang up. This editor, what's her name? She laughed. Oh yeah, I suppose that would help. She coughed again, a longer fit. It's Marissa Key. You'll like her. I heard her laughing at the last comment as she hung up. Marissa Key? I'll like her? And that's funny? The next morning, bright and early over coffee, my cell phone rang. Who's that? Dad said, still reading the paper while nibbling on toast. Dunno, I said, not recognizing the 773 number before flipping open the cell phone. Hello? Tyler Collins, she said. The voice was indescribable, somewhere between deep and high without being in between. And there was a lilt to it, just the way she said my name. It came out as half question, half statement. Speaking, I said. This is Marissa Key, she continued. Your editor. Miss Key, I said. I've been expecting you. What does your day look like? She said, skipping the small talk. Oh, give me a sec. I covered the mouthpiece and looked at Dad. What's today look like? We're caught up, he said, still reading the paper. Maybe a few hours in the morning, but nothing major. I'm wide open from 11 on, I said back into the phone. Fine, she said. I'll be there at 11:30. You're coming here? I said, glad I wouldn't have to drive to Chicago. Yes, she confirmed. Are there any hotels in? Where are you again? Grant City, I said. And yes, we have hotels here. 2 of them. Fine. Then I'll be there by 11:30. At the hotel? At your house, she said, agitation surfacing at the unnecessary talk. You know where I live? Yes. Okay then, I said. She disconnected without another word. What was Natalie foisting upon me? By 11:15, Dad was gone to visit Mom, and I'd showered the fine sheen of walnut dust off of my skin and out of my hair. I was changed into clean khaki slacks, a light blue Oxford dress shirt with cuffs rolled to accommodate the summer heat, and boat shoes, no socks. I was putting the final touches on combing my damp and unruly hair when the doorbell rang. Marissa Key was early. I ran the comb through one final time, checked that I'd shaved closely enough, then bounded to and down the stairs. Why am I hurrying like a tardy schoolboy? I, though, forcing myself to slow down as I approached the door. Because her voice on the phone, her no-nonsense manner, left me feeling like I was meeting my second-grade teacher, I realized. I opened the door, though, and saw that Marissa Key would never be mistaken for a second-grade teacher. Lou Reed groupie maybe, but never a schoolmarm. Mr. Collins, she said in that indistinguishable accent. I nodded and stepped back, looking her up and down as I did so. She was nearly as tall as me, maybe 5'9". with impossibly long legs and long, sinewy features. And skinny too, painfully so, like a runway model who lives on bottled water and fat-free crackers. Just two, thank you. Her hair was short, but thick and spiked, kind of like she'd stuck her finger in an outlet. Her face was part waif, part Cherokee Indian with a hint of Asian thrown in the mix. Face angling in a V to a small chin, high cheekbones, small yet full Cupid's bow lips, tiny, pert nose, and large, deep brown eyes slanted at the corners to give the hint of Asian. All told, Marissa Key could have been a runway model. She certainly had the build, the exotic features, and the long, awkward, gangly stride of a newborn foal. Yet, all of this clashed with her wardrobe and makeup. Her clothes were straight from a punk rock concert. Tight black jeans, black leather motorcycle boots with metal studs, tight t-shirt ending 2 inches above her jeans to reveal the sharp, jutting hip bones of the terminally skinny and the hint of a tattoo of unknown design, studded black leather bracelets on her wrists, and a large black leather bag slung over her shoulder. Her makeup only embellished this. Black mascara, lipstick, and nail polish, and a diamond stud in her left nostril. The overall look made it impossible to guess her age. She could have passed for 16, but she could also be my age. "Where shall we work?" she said, ignoring my roaming eyes and the astonished look that I know was plastered on my face. Do you have a dining room table?" she said. I nodded, focusing my stare on her impossibly dark brown eyes. "Can you run a cord to your laptop from there?" Yeah, I managed. "Sure." "Fine," she said, turning toward the kitchen and seeking out the dining room. "Get your laptop and bring it to the table." I obeyed. A few minutes later, I had the laptop fired up and we were seated at the table. She pulled the laptop in front of her and motioned for me to slide closer so we could both see the screen. "Okay," she said once I'd booted the final version of Long Gone. "Time to get to work." She reached into her black bag and pulled out a tattered copy of the Long Gone manuscript. It was huge, at least 6 inches thick, bound together with several thick rubber bands, and compounded by hundreds of yellow post-it notes stuck throughout the manuscript. "You've already read it?" I said, watching her pull the rubber bands off. "Of course. What did you think?" I said, fishing for a compliment. She turned and stared at me, though. Her look said it all. "You're wasting my time." "You're a capable writer, Mr. Collins," she said. "Tyler," I said automatically. Then I paused. "Just capable?" She made a face. "That's better than most." "Really?" "Really?" she said, fanning the first 10 pages in front of us. "Now can we get started?" "Sure." "Good," she said, emphasizing that we wouldn't be wasting any more time. And we didn't. Jesus, what's to say? She'd had the manuscript for a week, and the whole thing was littered with her notes. Notes on little things. Isn't there a better word to use here? What are you saying here? Is this the best way to say it? Tighten this passage up. You're letting the conflict wane here. The tension's dying. And that was just the first 60 pages, which took us until 6:30 to complete. In 7 hours, we took 2 potty breaks and she took 3 smoke breaks, standing on the back porch staring into the distance while she huffed down her cigarettes. I tried to engage her in conversation during her first smoke break, but her look told me that wasn't such a hot idea. I had to admit, though, she was good. Brilliant. Actually, I was amazed at the improvement when I reread the first 15 pages against my final manuscript, the manuscript that was probably going to make me a millionaire. The changes were subtle. A word here, move a sentence there, make the dialogue more vague here and more explicit over here. The overall effect was magical, though. It was really a massive improvement. "Well," she said, pushing herself back from the table as I read our changes. "Okay, her changes. Enough for one day?" I said. She nodded. "I'm hungry. Are there any decent restaurants in this town?" I smiled. "Well," she said, "can I take you to dinner?" She shook her head. "That won't be necessary, Mr. Collins." "Probably not," I said, "but I want to." Her look told me to back off, which made me try all that much harder. "Listen," I said, "I really want to talk about this. About you. How you do this. So if you don't mind, I'd like to take you to dinner." She fixed me with her stare, her lips set tight, and said nothing. I decided to wait her out, trying to put on an eager, innocent face as I did so. After a moment, that caused a flicker at the corner of her lips, the closest thing to a smile I'd seen from her all day. "Fine," she said, reaching over and bundling up the loose pages of manuscript into a tidy pile. "Then we'll make it a working dinner. We should be able to get another 10 pages done." I tried to convey with my body language and fallen face that this wasn't what I had in mind, but she ignored me. "Bring the laptop," she said, pushing away from the table and slinging her bag over her shoulder. I obeyed. Again, any thoughts that Marissa Key was an anorexic were quickly dispelled over dinner. I watched her steadily plow through a bowl, not a cup, of gazpacho, followed by a main course of Mexican stuffed meatloaf with grilled zucchini and chipotle cheese smashed potatoes. When she was finished, the plate looked like it had just come out of the dishwasher. "Still hungry?" I said, looking at my half-eaten braised brisket sandwich with a side of fresh fruit. "Sure," she said, sliding her plate out of the way and sliding mine in front of her. And the whole time she ate, we kept editing the manuscript. It was going faster now as I learned to trust her advice, and she figured out my own predilections for sentence construction and word choice. The waitress approached as Marissa finished the last of the fruit. It was Nicole. She and her husband owned the place. She took one look at the plates, then a glance at Marissa. "Dessert? What do you have?" Marissa asked, not bothering to look up from the laptop she was pecking away on. Nicole's look was disbelief. I could only give a slight shrug and smile in response. Nicole gave the dessert choices, and Marissa chose the bananas Foster over cinnamon ice cream. "2 spoons," Nicole said. Marissa looked at her, then at me. "Do you want some, Mr. Collins?" I just smiled and shook my head. "Just coffee, please." Nicole almost burst out laughing, but Marissa didn't notice. "Would you please stop calling me Mr. Collins?" I said. "It's your name," she replied, pointing at the manuscript. "What about this?" "I prefer Tyler," I said, not to be deterred. "I mean, we're probably about the same age, right?" "Whatever," she said, the impatience showing again. "Fine, Tyler. I'll call you Tyler, okay? So, Tyler, what should we do here?" "Tyler?" "Yeah," I said, smiling at her petulance. "Fine, let's change it." "How? What's your idea?" "To get you to tell me how to tighten it," she said, her speech going slow. "No," I said. "I wanted to have dinner to get ideas on how to edit my work better. Instead, we've spent the evening doing more editing without you really telling me anything. So I want to know how you do it, and I want you to tell me why. Hell, I want you to tell me how you even saw this, the flaw here." She frowned, then looked at the laptop and saved the work, both on the internal hard drive and on a flash drive. Flipping the laptop shut, she pushed it aside and again bundled up the manuscript, which she stacked on top of the laptop and pushed it aside just in time for Nicole to place her dessert in front of her. Picking up her spoon and taking a bite, she turned to me. "Okay, shoot. What do you want to know?" "How old are you?" 25. "How'd you get into this? Editing?" "I'm in the graduate school at Northwestern, working on my doctorate. This pays the bills." "Major?" "English and creative writing. Have you written anything?" Her face gave a brief flash of anger at this one, and she said nothing. "So how long have you been editing professionally?" "4 years." "Why do you do it?" "Like I said, it pays the bills. School's not cheap, you know." I nodded. "How long did it take you to go through and damned near tear apart every page of my manuscript?" Her eyes narrowed. "There's no need to be offended," she said. "It's my job." "I'm not offended," I protested. "I'm curious." "Jesus, I spent 2 months editing this, and you just got it last week. So how long did it take?" 3 days, she said, shoveling more bananas Foster into her mouth. "This is good, by the way. You sure you wouldn't like some?" "No, I'm fine," I said, but she already had a spoonful of ice cream and caramelized banana in front of my mouth. "Really?" she said. "Try it." So I rolled my eyes and tried it. "You're right," I said, taking the spoon from her and taking a piece of the banana glazed with caramel and melted ice cream. She flashed a smile, the first true smile of the day. "Listen," she said as we shared the rest of the dessert. "I got it in on Sunday morning. I spent 18 hours a day for 3 days. So what's the first thing you did?" "Read the whole thing. Twice." "You a speed reader?" She shook her head. "Fast, but not really a speed reader. And it goes faster the second time anyways. You know what you're reading. The second time, I start making notes of where the plot's getting weak. If a word or phrase jars me, something's unclear. You know." I nodded. I thought I knew. I thought I knew real well until I'd met with her and seen her find mistakes every other page of my manuscript. Now, I realized I didn't know shit. And after that, she scooped up the last bite of dessert and held her spoon toward me. I waved it off to her obvious delight. "After that," she said, "I just keep going over it." "So how many times did you go over it?" She shrugged. "Dunno. 12. Maybe 14. A lot. They pay you well for this? She hesitated before answering. Well enough. Covering your expenses while you're here? She shook her head. They want me to drive to and from Chicago every day. Not practical, though. I pulled my cell phone out. Who are you calling? She said, her eyes going wide. They're paying for your room, I said, and a meal allowance. She shook her head frantically, reaching over to take the cell phone from me. I turned my shoulder to block her out. Natalie, I said when she answered. Hello, Tyler, she croaked. I'd never seen her, but I could picture Thelma Diamond, the old bailiff on Night Court, chain-smoking cigarettes while talking to me. Marissa's here, I said. Good, she chuckled. And she needs the publisher, whoever that's gonna be. They need to pay for her room and meals while she's here. But she's only an hour away, Natalie protested. Which is 2 hours a day wasted on driving when it could be spent on getting this thing done, I said. Natalie was silent for a moment before speaking. You willing to put everything aside until this is done? Yes, I said, looking at Marissa glaring at me. Natalie sighed. Fine. After all, what's a room cost in Podunk, Illinois? And Natalie? What? This was at my insistence, I said, staring right back at Marissa as I spoke. Marissa's pissed off I'm even asking for this, okay? Natalie laughed her wheezing laugh. Told you she's a pistol. No, I said. You told me nothing. Just a vague warning that has proven all too true. Natalie seemed to think that was the funniest thing she'd heard all day. She was still laughing aloud when I clicked the phone shut. You have school to pay for, I said, sliding the phone into my pocket. The 1,000 or so in rooms and meals is better borne by those who can better afford it, okay? But the glare didn't leave her face. Instead, she stomped off to the restroom, then returned and bundled all of her things up. 8 o'clock, she said, staring down at me. See you then. By late the next day, we plowed through another 70 pages of the manuscript, going back to make additional changes in the first 60 pages as we did so. By the end of the afternoon, I was wiped, mentally and physically. Enough, Marissa said, her face impassive as I rubbed the exhaustion from my eyes. I nodded. Tomorrow then, she said, standing and scooping everything back into her bag. Wait, I said, reaching out to her arm. She jerked it away and glared at me. What? She glared. Why were you so pissed? I said, all day you've been, well, pissed. You shouldn't have done that, she said. What? Arranged for the hotel room and the meals? She only glared in response. I didn't do it just for you, I said. I did it so we could get this done faster too. Yeah, she said, still tense and pissed. Whatever. I just don't see why it's such a... Because, she fumed. Because they don't want hired gun editors making too many demands, Mr. Collins. Because if we do, they just go to someone else. Okay, Mr. Collins? So you got your way, but I may get fewer jobs because of it. So there. You happy now? I could only stare back. Embarrassed, I tried to do something nice for her, and maybe only screwed up her livelihood. Then I reached for my phone and dialed. Still going well? Natalie rasped. Great, I said. She's incredible. Natalie gave a wheezing cackle at that. Yeah, right. No, really, I said. We're really moving along. That's great, kiddo. That call yesterday, I said. Is she gonna get in trouble over it or anything? Publishers may bitch, she said. Depends on who gets the book, really. Why didn't you tell me? Didn't really think you cared, she said, surprised at the sudden anger in my voice. Then don't do it, I said. I'll take care of it myself, okay? Tyler, Natalie said. I'll square it. Okay, really? We're not taking that chance, I said, looking at Marissa as I spoke. Her features were still impassive, bordering on pissed with a new touch of too little, too late. You really like her, don't you? Natalie said, amazed. She's brilliant, I said, and I want to make damned sure she'll work with me when the next one's ready. Okay, Natalie said. Consider it done. Hell, we'll split it if that's okay. No, I said. I'll take care of it all myself. If that's what you want, she said, her voice getting soft like she was amazed. And this whole mess, I said, it stays between us, okay? And you don't hold it against her in the future, right? I wouldn't have done that, she protested, but her protests may have been a bit too energetic. I mean it, I said. If she's not getting work because I was a dumbass, I'll hear about it. And if she won't do my next book when it's ready, I'll know why. Okay. Settle down, Tyler, Natalie said. I said it's forgotten, so it's forgotten. Okay, I softened. Thanks. And sorry for sticking my nose in. Don't worry about it, kiddo, she wheezed before hanging up. I turned and looked at Marissa. Okay. It was little more than a twitch, but her nod was perceptible. And I'm sorry, I said. I won't stick my nose in anymore. She scrunched her lips together and to one side, then nodded again. So now that I'm the one paying, I said, can I buy you dinner before you go back to your room for the night? Just a burger, though, she said. Not as expensive as last night. I've got the money to buy you better dinner than just a burger, she repeated. I stared at her for a moment, watching her eyes flare up again. The hitching rail it is, I said, pushing back from the table. We took separate cars to the restaurant, and I arrived there first. I was no sooner in the door than I was accosted in a tight hug and a deep kiss. Hey you, Allie said, coming up for air. Hey, babe, I said, kissing her cheek before hugging her to me again. She was good to hug, and I seemed to need the hug for some reason. Probably because I just spent 10 hours with Marissa glaring, snorting, and all around treating me like shit. You eat yet? She whispered into my ear. I shook my head and broke the hug. Actually, I'm meeting someone here, I said. Kind of a working dinner. Oh, she said, almost pouting. But you can join us, I offered. Is he here already? I saw Marissa getting out of her car and walking across the parking lot to the entrance. She, I said, nodding my head out the window. You're kidding, right? Allie said, trying to hide the look of horror as she watched the tall, skinny goth chick stride through the door. Be nice, I whispered, then turned to Marissa as she entered. Marissa, meet Allison. My girlfriend. Marissa nodded, looked at Allison, then stuck her hand out. Allison. Allison tried to smile as she returned the handshake, but her eyes were locked on Marissa's black makeup and spiked hair. It is okay if she joins us for dinner? I said to Marissa. Your ticket, Marissa shrugged. Invite whoever you want. Within minutes, we were seated and our orders placed. So you want to work on this or what? Marissa said to my right. Work on what? Allie said to my left. His book, Marissa answered, shooting a quick glance at me. Book? I've written a book, I explained. Really? Allie said, like she didn't believe us. A book. And you're, what? His agent. Editor, Marissa mumbled, staring down at her Diet Coke. A book? Allie said again, her face a mixture of disbelief and excitement. You're not shitting me? You've written something and she's editing it for you? Go ahead and show her, I said to Marissa. Marissa pulled the tattered manuscript from her bag and laid it with a thump in front of Allie. Holy shit, Allie said, running her fingers over the title before flipping through the manuscript. It's huge. She looked at me. I was going to tell you once we got a publisher for it, I said. Not like it's a secret or anything. I looked directly at Marissa as I spoke the last. So how do you get a publisher? Allie said, her eyes glued to the manuscript as she flipped through it. So the next hour was spent discussing when and why I started writing a book, what the book was about, and all the shit involved in getting it published. I tried to get Marissa more involved with the conversation, but she seemed content to eat her burger and fries, along with a basket of cookies for dessert, only one of which she shared with me and Allie. Occasionally, she offered a point of clarification on the publishing process, but that was about it. Then Allie just confronted her point blank, and Marissa had no alternative but to answer. How many books have you edited so far? She asked Marissa. 19. Any I've heard of? Marissa named 3 or 4 that had snuck into the bestseller lists. And this one? How does it rate against those? Allie said. Marissa only shrugged. Come on, Allie prodded. You've seen the ones that are good, the ones that aren't so good, right? They were all pretty good, Marissa said, avoiding my bemused stare as she spoke. So how's this one? She only chewed her lip in response, her shoulders and arms tense as she gripped the Diet Coke in front of her. You won't hurt his feelings, Allie said. Right, Tyler? Not a bit, I agreed. So how is it? How does it compare? Marissa wouldn't budge, though. Allie shot me a look. What's going on here? The look said. I shrugged. Allie turned back to Marissa, leaning over the table and lowering her voice. Is it that bad? Marissa's head shot up like she'd been slapped. You're kidding me, right? That bad? So it's good? Allie prompted. It's the best thing I've ever worked on, Marissa said, then shot me an embarrassed look. So you think it's... I can't tell you if it's going to sell, she said, looking back at the table. But I can tell you that if the goddamned public knows shit from Shinola, it's going to be huge. Allie's mouth was open. That good? Better, Marissa said. So it's better than just capable? I said, smiling at her initial description of long gone. She looked at me, then looked back at the table. Jesus, Tyler, Allie said, watching Marissa's reaction. Sorry, I said. Why don't we all go get a beer? Sure, Allie said, standing. Marissa looked from me to Allie, then back again. I'm just gonna get back and turn in for the night if that's okay. Allie tried to talk her into staying, but it was a no-go. So Marissa left, while Allie and I moseyed to the bar for a drink. Halfway through our first beer, Allie started grinning. What? I said. This beer, she said, making a face. What's wrong with it? Doesn't taste right. Let me get you a different one, I said, motioning to the bartender. It's not that, she said, leaning in close. I'm just trying to think of something that would taste maybe a little bit better. I got the picture. We rushed back to her house, and I soon discovered that she was right. She tasted way better than Amstel Light. She's strange, Allison said while we snuggled in post-coital bliss. How so? Allie snorted. Like you didn't notice. You mean the makeup? I offered. The black clothes and all that? For starters, she said, rolling over and facing me. But she seems angry. At me? More like at the whole world. I only stared in response, my mind wandering over the few days I'd known Marissa and the hours we'd spent going over the book. Not like psycho killer pissed at the world, Allie explained. More like life sucks and everyone's an a-hole pissed. Know what I mean? Yeah, I said, starting to nod. I suppose you could see it that way. Still. What? Allie prompted when I didn't finish my last sentence. I shrugged. Just don't really know her, I guess. Could be anger. Could be just shy, too. Or having a bad day. I mean, come on. You only met her for an hour over dinner. Allie peered into my eyes, contemplating my words. Then she smiled, which turned into a grin. That's why I love you, she said. You're so sweet. You just can't really say a bad thing about anyone, can you? Love me? I said, tensing at the mere mention of the word. Her smile only got broader. You know what I mean, she said, slithering her head under the covers and showing me exactly what she meant. The next 5 days were spent with Marissa, 10 to 12 hours a day of editing, tightening, changing a word here and cutting some there. On the fourth morning, I noticed something I hadn't noticed the previous 2 days. Marissa was showing up with additional notes and changes for the things we'd already gone over. When are you doing this? I asked. What? She snapped, agitated for the millionth time at my time wasting questions. Going back over the stuff we already covered? The changes we've already made? At night, after dinner. What's the difference? It needs to be done. Jesus, I thought. She's going back and putting in another 4 or 5 hours while I'm out in the shop working on dwindling Dad's backlog and doing his bookkeeping. Just didn't really notice before, I said, that you were doing it. She rolled her eyes, then stared at me impatiently. Okay, good. Now you know. Can we get back to work here? And that's when I realized she wasn't really all that pissed off with the world. Allie had it wrong. Marissa was angry a lot. Definitely. But it was an anger born of suffering fools. She was focused, and she got impatient when her focus was derailed. I smiled at the realization and decided then and there to test my hypothesis. So you date anyone? None of your business, she said, not bothering to look up from the laptop as she typed some changes. Ever been married? Not answering, she said, turning to the manuscript and pointing at a passage we'd just gone over. You sure on this one? Yeah, I said. What about kids? You have any kids? There it was, the straw that broke the camel's back. What the hell, she said. I mean, who cares, Tyler? My personal life is none of your concern. This book's is your concern. Got it? And the sooner you quit worrying about my social life and start worrying about turning this piece of shit into a readable story, the better we'll both be. You said it was already really good, I shot back, enjoying the argument I'd started. For an unpolished piece of crap, she said, standing, but it needs work, and we don't have much time to get it done. Then where you going? I said, standing with her. Outside for a cigarette, she said, stalking toward the kitchen door. Alone. I smiled as I watched her flick open her Zippo and light up the smoke, puffing furiously to rid herself of the tension I'd created. As she was finishing, Dad pulled into the driveway. I watched him get out of the truck and look at the stranger smoking on his back porch. The look of horror on his face was priceless. I'd told him about the editor, but I hadn't described her to him. And he'd been gone to the rehab clinic for 15 hours a day for most of the previous 2 weeks, So he'd never seen her. The look on his face as he walked toward her, then past her with mumbled greetings met by a curt nod of Marissa's head, had me chuckling as he opened the door and entered the kitchen. "Is that?" he sputtered. "Yep," I beamed. "What do you think of her?" He turned his head and looked, then turned back to me. "You're kidding me, right? She's gonna help you get this book thing taken care of? She's the one. She any good?" The look on his face told me he wouldn't believe any affirmations of her competence, but I was feeling particularly puckish that morning. "Actually, Dad, she's an absolute genius. She's from Chicago, ain't she?" That seemed obvious. Goth chicks were unheard of in Grant City, even amongst the student body of our local liberal arts and sciences college. I only smiled and nodded. "Jesus," he said, shaking his head as he walked past me and toward the stairs to change into work clothes. I could hear his muttering as he climbed the stairs. Marissa returned from her smoke break a few minutes later, and we got back at it without more questions. When Dad went to the shop, he went out the front door, avoiding us entirely. It was day 11, and Marissa and I were 23 pages from done when my cell phone rang in the late morning. "Natalie?" I said. "We've finally got a winning bid," she said, her enthusiasm nearly jumping through the phone at me. I froze, afraid to ask. "Well," she prodded, "aren't you gonna ask who? How much? How many books is the deal?" I said, starting slowly. "3," she said, with an option for 2 more. "So I have to write 5 Lieutenant Randolph books?" "Nah, just 3. If you can still come up with it, then 2 more and they get first dibs on him." "Terms? Your royalty is 15%, which is pretty good. Not the best, but definitely above average for a first-timer. Long Gone will have a first printing of 250,000. Your advance is 1/3 of the royalties from the first run, the balance of your royalties payable quarterly. And what are they charging up front? $17 a book." I tried to do the math in my head, but failed. "A little over 200 grand when you sign the contract," she said. "The balance paid as the sales surpassed the first 1/3 of the initial run. Got it so far?" I nodded. 200 grand. Up front. For the love of God. "Okay," she continued. "Then here's the best part. Your rate goes all the way up to 18 for any copies, hardcover or paperback. Over 500,000. That's really good, by the way. Won't be as much money on the trade paperbacks, of course. They don't sell them for as much. But still, it's good money." The few percentage points didn't seem like much to me, but they really had her excited. "Now," she crowed, the wheeze gone from her voice, "here's the best part. The movie rights. You've already got someone for them?" "Uh-huh. We sold the option for a 0.5% of gross receipts if it's made into a movie. So I get 500 grand even if they don't make a movie out of it?" "Bingo." "When?" "As soon as you sign." "And when can I sign all of this?" "Soon as you can get your butt to Miami, sweetie." I sat back, staring at Marissa, but not seeing her. "So please tell me it's almost done, Tyler," Natalie said. "No later than noon tomorrow," I said. I heard her sigh of relief. "That's great time, kiddo. Then you can come down here the day after?" "Sure. See you then." I flipped the cell phone shut and stared at the ceiling. "Good news?" Marissa asked. I looked at her and nodded. "It's sold." She gave a tight smile. "Good," she said. "Then let's get moving. You promised this by noon tomorrow." I don't know what came over me. Probably the giddiness of the whole thing. Whatever it was, I just leaned over and swept Marissa into my arms and gave her a big, tight hug, nearly dragging her out of her chair and sending us both to the floor. With the hug, I felt the tension ease from my body. I also felt her body get more tense as the hug went along. "Sorry," I mumbled into her ear, breaking the hug and looking at her in embarrassment. "Whatever," she said, easing before looking at the manuscript. "Where were we?" "We finished at 3 the following afternoon." Marissa emailed the completed manuscript to Natalie, then started sweeping the manuscript into order before wrapping it in rubber bands and tossing it for the final time into her purse. "Let's celebrate," I said. She looked at me, then shook her head. "Come on," I prodded. "Just one final meal at the bar and grill. They've got a new dessert." She held back, but I pressed. "Listen," I said. "I'm sure you're sick of me by now. Probably just want to get the hell out of here and get a real meal at some hidden little gem in the city. But we need to start a tradition here." "Tradition," she said. "Tradition," I repeated. "You're gonna be the editor on all my books. If you'll have me, that is. And we'll always end the editing process with dinner at the bar and grill. Then you'll forget about me for 6 months or so until you have to come back, and I'll spend all that time trying to get another book written." Then, we'll start all over again, and end it again, at the bar and grill. Tradition, she said again, a smile curling the corner of her lips for only the second time since we'd met. Like Thanksgiving turkey. I beamed. Santa Claus, she said. Exactly. Can't buck tradition, I suppose, she said. Even if it's only the start of one. Gotta start somewhere, I said. She smiled fully now, teeth and all. And it was a pretty smile, assuming you could get around the whole black lipstick thing. Should we call your girlfriend? I shook my head. Nope. She tilted her head. Why not? Because we're starting a tradition, I reasoned. I don't know if we'll still be together next year when we do this again, but then we'd have to invite her anyway. Because of the whole tradition thing, Marissa said, nodding in mock serious understanding. Exactly. Okay, she said, standing and scooping the rest of her belongings from the table and into her massive black bag. Pick me up at 5:30. Done. By 5:45, we were seated at the bar and grill. Marissa was demolishing a Thai-glazed chicken wings appetizer, and I was sipping my beer and watching her in amazement. What? She said, seeing me staring as she sucked the sauce off of her long, delicate fingers. I just don't know how you eat so much, I said. And you're you really keep your shape well. Skinny, she said, pushing the empty plate to the side. You can say it. Skinny, scrawny, beanpole. I know what I look like. I smiled. So how do you do it? Dunno, she replied. Just lucky, I guess. So what do you do? I mean, I know you're in graduate school and all, but why? For what? Writing, she said. I love books. I mean, really, really, really love them. They're my passion, my whole reason for being. So you want to teach? Frankly, the thought of this goth-looking girl standing in front of a class of serious college students seemed a bit far-fetched. Sure, I suppose so. She smiled as the waitress delivered our dinners. Roadhouse burger with sweet potato fries for her, grilled chicken sandwich with fresh fruit for me. Sorry, but I can't get away with eating like Marissa. I'd weigh 400 pounds in about a week. I really want to write though, she said with a mouthful of food. Books? Short stories? Poems? She shrugged. Probably not poetry. Doesn't really excite me all that much. Short stories are nice too, but they don't make enough to live on. So I guess I'm gonna have to start with books sometime soon. Any ideas? She shook her head, cramming a bunch of fries in after her latest gulp of burger and chasing it down with a sip of Bacardi and Coke. Need more experience, she said when she finally swallowed. You know, life experiences. What about your life's experiences? Okay, I was on a roll, getting her to open up and talk with me more than the previous week and a half combined. Might as well push the point. Her look told me she didn't understand the question, though. You married? Engaged? Kids? Any brothers or sisters? Where are you from? You know. Tell me about Marissa Key. Not much to tell. Born and raised in Chicago. Half-sister. Mom and dad divorced when I was 7. I've seen him maybe 10 times since. Mom's a teacher. Sister's a lawyer. Never married or engaged, and I'm not seeing anyone now. I nodded. So your half-sister the lawyer, I said, my eyes widening as I looked at her and saw the faintest familiarity. It wasn't much, but it was there. Yeah, your Florida girlfriend. Susan's my sister. Different father, same mother. I was stunned. No wonder Natalie had laughed. Don't pout, Marissa said, seeing the emotions rushing through my face. So when Susan said she knew an agent? She lied, Marissa confessed. I know the agent, but when she read your manuscript, she called me and told me I had to read it and try to get someone to look at it for you. So she sent it to me and I read it. What can I say? She was right. It was incredible. So you called Natalie. I continued the story for her. Marissa nodded. I've worked for her before. Told her I'd found a brilliant new manuscript that needed an agent to market it. Brand new author. It took some begging and pleading, but she agreed to read it if Susan could get it to her. And the rest is history, I concluded. Pretty much, Marissa agreed. We finished our dinners in silence, me not knowing how to feel and wondering why I even gave a shit. Done pouting, she said, pushing her plate aside then reaching for a piece of melon on my plate. I laughed. Nothing to pout about, is there? She shrugged. I mean, you did me a real big favor. Just wish I'd known earlier, I guess. What's the difference? I wouldn't have backed off so quickly on making Natalie pay for the room. She shook her head. It's still a business. Always remember that. And your cut? Do you get something? She shrugged. Natalie will probably give me a bonus of some kind. Not much, but something. Then what's in it for you? She smiled. You're kidding, right? I know it's not the joy of my company. You've made that clear for the past 11 days. The chance to make sure another promising author gets a chance, she offered. I shook my head. Fine, she admitted. Natalie agreed to be my agent if I can get a book written, and it's worth a shit, okay? I nodded. Fair enough. So now you know everything, right? Suppose so. The waitress cleared the dirty plates, and Marissa ordered the warm peach melba and a glass of Pinot Grigio to go with it. So how's Susan doing? I said. She liked you, Marissa replied, finishing her Bacardi and Coke and staring impatiently at the kitchen door where her dessert was being made. A lot. She's seeing anyone yet? Marissa turned back to me. You really care? What's that supposed to mean? She just made it sound like you were just sex buddies is all. That wasn't by my choice, I argued, feeling my anger rising. Jesus, Tyler, she said, making a face at my reaction. Chill, man. Nothing wrong with it, even if you were. I'm just saying. Saying what? That she was just a convenient piece of meat? That's all I cared about? Hey, she said, settle down. I don't really know how you felt, or still feel about her, okay? I nodded, trying to settle down. Who's that over there? Marissa said. Don't change the subject, I replied. It's just that she's been staring at you for the past 20 minutes, and I can't tell by her face whether it's good or bad. I started to turn, but Marissa's hand on my arm stopped me. Don't look, she said. She looks a lot like your girlfriend. What's her name? Allison. Yeah, her. And she's with a guy and a baby. My ex-wife, I said. With her new family. Marissa frowned at that, then picked up her spoon and took a bite of the peach melba as it was slid in front of her. Want a bite? She said with a mouthful of peaches, ice cream, and raspberry puree. I shook my head, content to sip my after-dinner cup of strong, black coffee. So that's her new husband? And their baby, I said, sneaking a quick look to confirm it was, in fact, Kristen. She was staring at me, as was Randy, who appeared depressed by the whole thing. Kristen turned away, but Randy just kept right on looking. Marissa said something that, with her mouth full of food, I didn't catch. What? She swallowed, took a sip of wine, then spoke in a low voice. I said that's not his baby. What do you mean that's not his baby? Of course it is. That's why she left. So she could move up here, continue her affair with him, get knocked up by him, and start a whole new family. When was the baby born? Who cares? Because there's no way that's his baby, she said, her eyes looking into mine as she spoke. There was a touch of fear there and maybe sadness, and I had no idea what was coming over her. It's his, I said again. Look at him, Tyler. He's, what, 5'6" maybe. Stocky build, jet black hair and dark skin tone. Look at the baby. He's big. I'm guessing he's about a year, but he's big even for a baby. She's not that big. Your ex, that is. And the baby's got the blondest hair and bluest eyes I've ever seen. Christ, they're 15 feet away and I can see the blue in those eyes. So what are you saying? I said, knowing exactly what she was saying. You've got real light brown hair, she said, sipping her wine and looking over my shoulder at Kristen's table. And I'll bet you were blonde when you were little. Real blonde. He's not mine, I said. And you have blue eyes too. Big time. And your skin's light. Not dark like what's his name's skin tone. He's not my baby, I whispered, my voice going hoarse as I counted months in my head. Then when was he born? I shrugged. Don't know. She nodded. You may want to find that out, she said, pushing her half-eaten dessert to the side before gulping down the rest of her wine. We left without another word between us, and I felt Kristen's eyes gouging holes in my back as we walked past them. Dear listeners, the next part will be out in a few hours. Thanks for the patience.